Good morning, everybody. This is Tuesday. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'm sorry I'm starting a little bit late. I was looking for a clip that is necessary for one of my guests, and I am having a hard time finding it, which ended up pushing the show. That being said, that doesn't necessarily have to be found now, and I can find that over the course of the show. I hope you guys are doing okay. I always say, if you find yourself under the sound of this voice, you have my deepest appreciation for being so. You could be anywhere at this point, for all intents and purposes, doing pretty much anything. So the fact that you find yourself here, you have my deepest appreciation, especially this early in the morning on the East Coast, or for this matter, at night on the West Coast. I'm sorry, on the other side of the globe. That being said, I see my guest here. And so I'm going to go to my guest. He seems to be in an automobile. That's okay. My man, Dr.
Good morning. I'm struggling here in traffic. And so now I'm trying to find, because I'm having some difficulty hearing you. So give me 1 moment.
You're perfectly fine. You should have told me you were going to be in the car. I wouldn't have pushed for an interview if I knew you were going to be traveling.
Hey, man, here we go. The show must go on.
The show must go on. Indeed, indeed.
Give me 1 second here. Oh, shoot.
You okay?
You know what? I've got a problem here because
can't hear me.
I don't have another headset, and I'm having serious trouble. Okay, let's see if we can forge ahead. Go ahead.
I'll try to be loud, but I don't want you to die in a car crash.
Oh no, I've parked.
Oh, okay. It'll be a lot
so
of views.
Here's what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to put the phone to my ear so I can hear it, and then pull it away so you can see me. So
that works.
All right.
That's fine. All right. As you say, the show must go on. I would like to show you something, and I would like you to help reconcile these things for me. Can you see this? And let me know if you can see it. Give me 1 second. I'm going to share it here, and I'll share these in order so you can see it all at once.
Yeah, I don't know why I can't hear you.
You still can't hear me?
Anyway.
Can you put it to the car speakers by chance? Like Bluetooth to the speakers of the car?
Oh, let's try this. Let's try this. Let's see if that's better.
Okay. How about now? Is that better? Okay. He will be back. I have strong belief that he will be back. In the meantime, I will show you all what I am referring to. Oh, okay. Dr. Wilmer Leon is back, as I pointed out.
Now I got it. We're straight.
Okay. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So I need you to help reconcile something for me. As you know, the UN is having this meeting that's taking place. And so you have all of the countries that are giving their speeches and everything else. Apparently, there have been glitches for one Muslim country after the next that have called Israel, effectively pointing out Israel's committing a genocide. On a positive, every country effectively got up and walked out when genocidal maniac Netanyahu went up to speak. But what's interesting to me is this. This picture is still on, I want to point this out, the U.S. Embassy, Syria. Stop this terrorist. Stop this terrorist. It's very emphatic. Stop this terrorist. And yet, that same terrorist is shaking hands with Secretary of State Marco Rubio. That same terrorist is sitting here with David Petraeus.
And Sharaf Nasadi.
Now, just to point out to the audience, if you were in the military and you served the United States fighting ISIS, fighting Al-Qaeda, this is a jaw-dropping moment. It is a jaw-dropping moment. Reconcile these things for me. How on earth do we have Jelani on a wanted poster, still there, U.S. Embassy, and yet shaking hands with all of these leaders, including Donald Trump at one point, Donald Trump saying he was a great guy, good look, etc. Give me your thoughts.
Well, first of all, what this demonstrates is there is no moral basis. There is no moral reality. There is no moral North Star for American policy. It's based very simply on the adage, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so at one point, Al-Jilani had a $10 million bounty on his head from the CIA because he was a head-chopping terrorist. And as the United States found that he would be a vital asset in removing President al-Assad from Syria, then he became an ally, an asset, someone who could be used to serve for the United States a greater end. And from all reports, when you talk to Dan Kovalik, when you talk to Jeremy Kuzmarov, when you talk to a number of people who are very familiar with what's happening in the region, he's still engaged in those murderous terrorist activities. If you're Alawite, for example, you're living in Syria in fear. So again, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And what I think he needs to pay very close attention to, because a lot of folks over the years have made the mistake, whether it is Muammar Gaddafi, whether it is Saddam Hussein. What did Henry Kissinger tell the world? It's dangerous to be an American enemy. It is fatal to be an American ally.
Oh, agreed on that one. He better remember that. He is disposable, like nobody's business at this case. And, you know, Marco Rubio, if you remember when he was given testimony, was making the point of saying he doesn't believe that Syria is going to be able to keep together. So they are whining and dining him. He's looking at the New York skyline. Mind you, Al-Qaeda supposedly was the one that took the skyline down. But he's admiring the skyline. He's talking to generals. He's talking to Marco Rubio, Secretary of State. He's shaking hands with Donald Trump, the president of the U.S. And again, I just want to, there is still a wanted poster of him on the U.S. Embassy in Syria's website as he walks casually through the United States. Easily can be taken up. That is astonishing. And as we speak, they're like setting fires in Syria right now, burning down ethnic communities that they don't necessarily like. They don't care.
They don't care.
I am. That is a jarring experience, though, right? Especially for somebody who fought in Iraq. Like, I've known people to fight in Iraq. I've known, if I'm not mistaken, my cousin fought in Iraq, or at the very least, I think they sent him over to Iraq. And so you have this kind of weird scenario of, hey, we need you to go put your life on the line. We need you to risk your life for America to fight the terrorists. It is that much of a fight that needs to be fought.
Well, you know, I think there's another question as well, and that is a question to Petraeus. I'm sorry, Petraeus. I got used to calling him Petraeus.
Yeah, Petraeus. Petraeus is right. Petraeus.
What do you stand for? What are you about? You were there. You he left before al-Jilani became
same group,
you know, rose to power, but he was fighting al-Jilani's predecessors.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people have to ask him, what are you about? Lil Marco, well, we know what you're about. So, you know, to me, that's another element to all of this. The hypocrisy of all of this continues just to be nauseating.
Agree with you on this. I don't know how they reconcile that. It don't seem to matter. They don't seem to try. Which I'm not sure if it's sadder that they've just assumed that the public will accept it. Assume that the propaganda is enough. Presume that the public doesn't know the guy chopped heads. And the handshake is with the same hand that he chopped off heads with. And they're like,
no, and is continuing to do so.
Yes. Well, he has his dogs to do that now.
He understands how to delegate.
Yes. Yes. This is my favorite head chopper. Please go and murder the allies.
The next thing you're gonna see is him doing Ginsu knife commercials. Don't send your money yet. There's a bamboo steamer that comes with this deal.
I should know how great this knife is. I've used plenty to chop off heads. Yeah, that's morbid. That's sad, actually. That's very morbid. I would like to pose an argument to you, and I want to get your take on it. If there was a woman on, I think it's a woman. I'm assuming it's a woman. Maybe I'm being sexist. When you can't see somebody, for some reason you attach gender to the person.
Sure.
But there's a group on Twitter called Mina Uncensored. In fact, let me show you this first. This is a couple out of Israel, settlers, so they're maniacs and genocidal. I want to play just a very short part of this because it backs up the argument that I'm trying to make. Just for the audience who can't hear it. How the hell, after October 7th, 2 years out, does Gaza still even exist? How does the Gaza Strip exist? How are the residents able to go to the market in some cities? How can it be that after we slaughter in Gaza envelope civilians and soldiers, how are those terrorists still alive? Breathing healthfully and raising their heads. Effectively, how on earth, with a military that has nukes, with getting billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars a year from the United States, if not more at this point, because a lot of that money probably we don't even know about, having all of the high weapon systems, aircraft, sophisticated military, and all of this other stuff, how are there people breathing in Gaza? That is a question. That is an argument. Now, Donald Trump apparently is creating, I'm going to call it an off-ramp, to put it nicely, but Trump to present plan on ending Israel's war to the Arab Muslim leaders. So he's going to be meeting on the sideline with the vassal governments in the Middle East, Egypt, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, et cetera, et cetera. And he's presenting this plan to them of saying, effectively, hey, we'd like to offload Gaza onto you. And we're going to get Arab money to help rebuild it. And we want you to effectively militarize it with your military. And Israel will pull out. I'm fascinated by this because that woman has a point. She's genocidal, yes. She's a maniac, yes. She's evil, yes. But she has a point. Why haven't you been able to take Gaza? Why haven't you been able to pacify Gaza? And as I keep pointing out, there's a difference between airstrikes, meaning murdering people and accomplishing a military objective are two different things. You may be prolific baby murderers. That doesn't mean you're accomplishing your military objectives. And then after nearly 3 years out, with nukes, with all of this money and weapon systems coming from the United States, Hamas still exists. And not just still exists, replenishing their numbers. Israel doesn't have control of the ground. If they did, the war would be over with. And they certainly don't have control of the tunnels underneath Gaza. And so you have to ask the question of, if Israel is indeed succeeding, yes, you've been able to murder civilians, but that's different than winning a war. And again, it's not even a war. You're just murdering civilians at this point. But the opposition force still exists. It's still killing Israelis when they pop their heads, when they put their military into Gaza. Are they losing this? I mean, you can say the same thing about Lebanon and Syria, but specifically in the Gaza thing, are they losing so much to the point where you have an exhausted military that Donald Trump, every bit as much as he saved them when they were fighting Iran, is now trying to effectively get them out of the situation here? Give me your thoughts.
The answer to your question of are they losing this, the answer is very clearly yes. Some will tell you they have lost. The woman that was sitting at that table asking those genocidal questions bought into a lie. She bought into the lie of the invincibility and the moral clarity and supremacy of the Zionist argument, of the Zionist experiment, of the Zionist colony. She bought into the lie that the Israeli Defense Force is this superhuman military organization that can't lose. And That's a lie. That's been proven to be a lie. What if that woman's questions were honest as opposed to being rhetorical? I would tell her to read some Frantz Fanon, because you're right. They are fighting a resistance movement.
Yeah.
And that's something that a lot of people in this country don't understand. They're fighting a resistance movement. There's a reason. I'd also tell her to read People's War, People's Army, General Giap in Vietnam.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah. I was thinking Vietnam.
The resistance movement. These folks are in it till the last dog dies, because they're fighting for their culture. They're fighting for their land. They're fighting for their existence as a people. That's why we couldn't win in Vietnam. That's why we spent 22 years in Afghanistan and $2 trillion down the drain. That's why the Taliban that we went in to fight in Afghanistan is controlling Afghanistan today.
Right.
Colonizers, they don't understand. That's why Niger has run France out of Niger. That's why the Burkina Faso and Burkina Faso are in control of Burkina Faso. These folks don't play.
Yeah.
They don't play. Minister Farrakhan told George Bush before the shock and awe thing when we went into Iraq. I play this speech every week because it's still relevant. He was at the National Press Club talking to he went to the National Press Club, and then from the National Press Club, he went to the Howard Inn when that still existed. And he told George Bush, quote, "You can't win this with your technology. The first 2 or 3 weeks, you got this. But eventually, you'll have to bring your soldiers in here." Talking about Iraq. "And when you do, they've got something for you." He said, "You've never fought a soldier with the heart of a Muslim." He said, "You don't know nothing about people lying down in the road, letting tanks roll over them so that they can explode improvised devices that they're." He says, "You've never fought an enemy like this. You have no idea what this is about." He said, why are your soldiers in the army?" He said, "Your soldiers are in the army primarily, but not because they want to defend your country." He said, "Because they can't get a job and they don't want to be criminals. They don't want to sell drugs. They don't want to be criminals. So they join the army. And then you've got to dope them up, lie to them, and send them into into harm's way." He said, "You're fighting a whole different type of person." He was right then. And I think that's the answer to your question now.
Yeah. They thought that because they had the military backing and everything else. And one example of this, Israel calls up 200,000 people. According to Netanyahu, I think 60,000 show up. And, Israeli media tends to be more honest, weirdly enough, or at the very least more willing to openly question what the government is doing. And they were like, what the hell is this? What is this propaganda scam that you have all of these people that are willing to fight and you're only able to get this amount? Why haven't we been able to take Gaza? And I think the answer is that you have an exhausted military that is built kind of like the Nazis for this kind of shock and awe, this kind of fast moving hit and stop, because you only have 8 million people in your country. So it's not like you have a huge base of support that you can have these kind of long attrition wars. Not to mention, you don't build your own weapons because you only have 8 million people. So you're entirely reliant upon a secondary government or secondary governments, basically all of Europe and the United States, for your very existence.
And that's what an opposition force, that's what a resistance movement That's what a guerrilla organization depends on. That's what they understand. You're not in this like we're in this. They haven't, they're fighting for different reasons. And those reasons, Matt, that's why I say, folks, read Frantz Fanon. He explains it very clearly. Who wrote oh shoot, the something of the oppressed. Pablo Ferrer.
Okay.
Pedagogy of the oppressed. This is a different. Look, when I was in Iran, I was in the in one of the bazaars, and this guy heard me speaking English. He was and he came out from his stall, and we were talking, and I can't remember what the question was, but when he started talking about he said, if the United States thinks that they're going to come into Iran, man, the look in this dude's eyes, the look in his eye.
It's like a tail better.
They ain't playing, homie.
No, you're going to radicalize a population. Those
soldiers
will be hostages. Those soldiers.
These folks ain't playing.
No, we don't get that. I don't think we get it in real terms. We may have to get it at some point. Hell is hot. Stove is hot. Maybe, Donald Trump wants to touch it at some point. There's an argument that he is going to touch that stove. Colonel Wilkerson fully believes that they're going to put troops into Iran. And I suspect for the first few days, your airstrikes maybe be okay. The moment that those troops land, those troops are toast. Those troops are toast. This is not Iraq. This is a different animal. And maybe that's necessary, unfortunately, for the American public to wake up. Maybe it is. I hate this notion that the United States believes that it can pretty much attack any country. This is not the 1980s. This is not the 1990s. This is not this massive industrial base that the U.S. has.
This is not the 1960s.
No, it's not.
This is not Vietnam.
This is a different animal, and countries have moved on.
I don't think Americans can wake up, because too many of them believe in the tropes of American exceptionalism. They believe in, even though many of them couldn't explain it if you asked them, they believe in this manifest destiny. They believe in what I remember hearing George Bush one day talk about, American internationalism. What?
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
and the Sinclair Media Group that owns ABC affiliates, they're not going to allow Americans to understand this. The New York Times won't allow Americans to understand this. Look, when was the last time the United States won a conflict? World War II.
I do get that. And we're living off that.
Right.
But there is something substantially different than having missile carriers knocked out the water. There's something substantially different than having hundreds of thousands of troops stuck in Iran. Meaning the U.S. believed that it won the Iraq war. Many people do. In fact, I spoke to a woman who was in the Iraq war. Her and I got this big argument over it because she was a soldier. She didn't want to own the fact that they lied her into a war. And so she was, in her mind, was still going with this idea of, no, they had weapons of mass destruction. And I was like, you realize Dick Cheney doesn't even say that, right? And she was like, no, really, they do. And it was kind of like, I put my life on the line. I can't own up to the fact that I was lied into a war. Who knows if she still believes that today? I'm saying it is a substantial difference than losing outright to Iran. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you're absolutely right on this. Maybe American exceptionalism keeps ticking along, even being in a depression, even being, losing a war in open sense. Who knows? I mean,
how many people showed up to honor that racist, xenophobic bigot Charlie Kirk? 77 million people voted for Donald Trump and his BS and lies.
Yes. But
77 million.
Yes, but one of those lies was, I'm going to keep you out of wars. That was a heavy lie.
Right.
I'm trying to point out that the majority of the American public doesn't necessarily like going into these wars, whether on the left or on the right. The political branch does.
I hope I'm wrong. I pray I'm wrong. Where you've known me long enough to know where was the last time you heard me say I want to be wrong? History tells me otherwise, and I bet on history until history shows me something different.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, why would Trump use that specific lie? Why not take the neocon position like a Kamala Harris or Lindsey Graham? Why use the specific lie, I'm going to be the guy to keep you out of wars, if that wasn't the case? Meaning he was crowd surfing. And
right,
Trump is a racist, Trump is a bigot, all that stuff is true. He's incompetent, as incompetent can be, but he is a great crowd surfer.
He is a phenomenal marketeer.
He is. And when he looks at the thing for George Bush and he puts a knife in Jeb Bush saying, your brother got us into a war, and he gets this massive crowd. Why would he take that tact if he didn't think that tact was successful? I mean, he's running around telling people, I ended 10 wars. I ended the war between Azerbaijan and Albania. It's like, dude, it's like, he's so precious. Don't nobody tell him. Don't tell him he's so precious, right? Like, why would he take that tact if he didn't believe that the American public was on board for that specific line?
Because he wasn't speaking to the American public. He was speaking to a very narrow group, a subset. He was speaking to a very narrow, a very small subset of the American public. Plus, that's a who in this country, when you say to them, I'm going to take us out of war, would say, oh, please don't do that. No, let's invade somebody else. It's a very effective trope to use. And it also enabled him, if you think about the American electorate, if you think about it in terms of a Venn diagram and concentric circles that overlap, you can take people from varying political ideologies, and when you put anti-war on the table, a lot of those disparate or different ideologies will overlap on that point.
Agreed.
So he understood very clearly, this is a message, this is part of a message that will cross ideological boundaries. So if you're on the far left and you understand, look, in fact, I know people from the far left, from the very far left, that said to me, I'm down with him because he's anti-war. That was their only issue. And now they will tell you they were duped, they were hoodwinked, bamboozled, and led astray.
Yeah, right amok.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I think there are a couple of different answers to your question. Again, who's going to tell, if he had said, I'm going to give everybody $10,000 in a puppy, who would have said, no puppy, please?
I would have said, keep the puppy because I don't want to clean up after the puppy. But thanks for the 10,000. I love dogs though. So.
10,000. My platform is $10,000 for everybody and a puppy. Hey man, I might run on that in 28. I could say a puppy in every pot, but that probably has a bad.
That's a bad connotation.
That has a bad connotation to it.
No, I get your point. That for all intents and purposes, the American public can be ginned up for war in a spin up in a heartbeat. They're anesthetized, so they're just disengaged, kind of like the Germans, right? Where it's like Hitler is invading countries, and they're like, yeah, well, I mean, we're German. I mean, it's
Let me add one other quick point to that, because to show you how quickly he can flip, those Mexicans that are streaming across our border are terrorists.
yes,
Maduro in Venezuela is a terrorist. So on the one hand, he uses the anti-war trope to get in, but now he labels everybody as a terrorist. He's telling you he wants Bagram Air Base back. Why?
That America built it,
Which they didn't, but liars lie. Now he wants Bagram Air Base back. Why? He must be planning an incursion that's going to require the use of Bagram Air Base.
yes. Yeah.
So he lied. He understood the buttons to push. Boy, there are a lot of analogies I could use here, but I won't. He knew what buttons to push to get into office. And now he's going to do his damnedest to execute the imperialist colonialist plan that is America.
Yes. Yeah, agreed. No, I agree with you. I do agree with you. I guess my main case was whether the American public will be okay with this and go along with it. But
I think the real question is, will enough of America not be okay with it, and will they be willing to take the requisite action to bring it to a close?
Yeah. That requires leverage. That requires dead bodies.
It requires, it requires organization.
No. What I mean is,
oh, you mean soldiers coming back in body bags too?
Yeah, that requires you knocking out those those tankers that are out that going to be near the Middle East, near Iran. That requires people coming back in body bags every bit as much as in Iraq War.
Yeah,
America without leverage.
But a lot of that depends on the effectiveness of that depends on the narrative. And I'm not saying that you're wrong, because you're not. I'm hoping I'm trying to add to the analysis, and by saying when Xi Jinping is a dictator, and Xi Jinping is a strong man, and Vladimir Putin, by vilifying these individuals, he's trying to create an environment in this country and a mindset in this country that America has to go out and vanquish these evil people.
Agreed.
So part of the question becomes, how successful can he be in creating that mindset?
Yeah. But even Saddam Hussein, though, I mean, they successfully created the mindset of Saddam Hussein as a dictator. He's a strong man. He's a bad guy.
Right.
But within a couple of years, the anti-war thing became a whirlwind at that point. It didn't matter what Saddam Hussein was. It was bodies coming back in coffins, meaning it was the leverage that was being applied to America, saying there is costs. They didn't do that for Bashar al-Assad because there was no cost. They didn't do that for Libya because there was no cost. We don't care as a country about them murdering, committing a genocide, because there's no cost to us personally. If there is a cost, we have 100,000 dead Americans. They will be, regardless of the narrative, there will be a whirlwind. I could be wrong.
No, I think there is a cost. The question is, how long are you in this game? Because, see, I think to a certain, a lot of what we're feeling the blowback today. So, okay. So a big problem that we have with Iran, we started in 1953 when we overthrew Mohammad Mossadegh.
Yes.
See, those folks are in it for the long game.
Yes.
When you look at the Palestinian resistance, those people are in this for the long game. They have a different understanding of they have a different understanding of time. You have the watches, we have the time. They tell you when they say to you, this isn't over, they don't mean you and me. They mean if my great grandson has to step in here 200 years from now, he's going to step in. We don't understand that. So Donald Trump, for all intents and purposes, is playing the short game with short money. They're in this because their cultures are as old as they are, thousands of years old, because they have a different perspective of history than we have. We're not even 250 years old yet. And they're 3,000 years old. That's like me trying to tell my father, man, you don't know. Okay, boy. You'll find out what I do know. Mess around and find out, son. So this is a mess around and find out, son moment.
Yeah. I mean, look, we have been screwing with them ever since they got rid of the Shah. Meaning we haven't let them.
That was my point. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. You know what? I'm sorry. I got confused on my own point. Sorry about that. You're fine. It's early in the morning, man. Look. So my point was the problem that we're having with Iran today, we started it in 1953. We still haven't been able to solve that math equation. We still don't get it.
Yeah.
It's not that the Iranians are crazy. It's that we started that fight with them and they refused to capitulate. That was my point. They're playing the long game. We don't know how to do that. We're not built for that. To your point about the IDF, they come in, hit and leave. They come in, massacre babies, blow up hospitals, and leave. That was my point.
Yeah, they get stuck into a long war of attrition, and all of a sudden, America, daddy, needs to come in and save their life.
40 years later, you're still messing with these people.
Yeah.
22 years in Afghanistan.
And a different country. Like, they have been preparing for this war ever since Afghanistan fell. So.
Did anybody who watched that military parade from China, did anybody who watched that recognize anything? What you should have recognized is we got B-1 bombers, they got B-1 bombers. We got F-35s. Not only do they have F-35s, they got F-35s that fly in the rain. Their F-35s can fly in the rain. Ours can. They have hypersonic missiles cruise missiles we don't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Play silly games, win silly prizes.
I would tell you, though, racist people don't see the world clearly.
No.
That is an axiom that I believe in, like gravity.
To that point, if I can quote Minister Farrakhan again, never underestimate the blindness that attends arrogance, or your point, racism. You don't see with your eyes. You see with a combination of your heart and your mind. And your racism or arrogance blinds you to the realities that are right before your very eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And you wind up stepping in it because you don't see it on the ground.
And you don't think after a calamity like that, not to mention something that may include economic collapse, that America looks at that? See, Ukraine is too diffuse. But
I'm sorry, Ukraine. Say that again. Ukraine.
It's too diffuse.
Too diffuse. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a loss. It's humiliating, but it's humiliating in a way that you could be like, oh, Putin is a bad guy, and Trump could say, well, Ukraine lost this war. When the reality of it is, obviously, the U.S. lost this war. If you're putting troops on the ground, you can't hide that. That's a different animal. And I guess my point is, if you lose in Iran, how does that not unravel this kind of empire stuff? I mean, for one, how can you make an argument to fight China when you lost in Iran? How can you make an argument to fight? Keep in mind, the entire point of them dragging Russia into its own Vietnam and Afghanistan was to effectively destroy the Soviet state. Isn't that the graveyard of empires every bit as much as Vietnam was for the USSR? I mean, I guess that's the thing that I'm looking at.
I wrote a piece 10 years ago, or Afghanistan, where empires go to die. That was the title of my op-ed.
Right.
And I was making the point, whether you're Alexander the Great with war elephants, or whether you're George Bush with B-1 bombers, you don't go in there and win. Those people don't lose.
Yeah, they won it.
Afghanistan is where empires go to die.
I guess your point is the U.S. lost that war. The empire still goes on. I think that's your point. It's like, I was wrong. This was one of those cases I got it wrong.
Ali fought years beyond his prime.
Yeah.
Leon Spinks beat him. Leon Spinks beat the greatest because the greatest fought long beyond his prime. You mentioned an economic collapse. Well, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with your point that there will come to Jesus moment in the United States. I just don't know, based on history,
if it's Iran,
when that moment will be, because it has come and gone so many times just in the last 6 years.
Yeah.
So again, going back to my dad, I don't know what it's going to take for you to get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you will get it.
Yeah, I don't know what that wake-up call is. That's the catch.
There you go. There you go.
Dr. Leon, man, I always appreciate these conversations with time.
Oh, and I with you, man. Yeah.
One thing before I let you go. One more thing before I let you go. This is, I was amazed by this. And if you are a Democrat, you should be terrified by this. Not Bridget McCain, not Bridget Macron, apparently showing her genitals to BBC. I'm not going to cover that. I'm not going to show that at all. It's like, I'm a woman. Look at my fantastic vagina. No, I'm going to show something more interesting. So actually, that would be pretty interesting, but this is more interesting than that. At the very least, more relative or indicative of what we need to see.
For GOP, more on the.
Look at this. This is a poll conducted, I think it was Washington Post, but I could be wrong.
What do you think? Yeah, what are we seeing? Donald Trump being underwater, Democrats, and all this guarantees us we're going to fly high in the midterms. Let me tell you, this guarantees you nothing, because at this particular point, the Democrats are the New Orleans Saints of political parties. What are we talking about? Trust the Dems or GOP more on the economy? Who leads on the economy? Republicans by 7. Immigration, Republicans by 13. How about crime? A big issue for Donald Trump and the Republicans. Look at that. Lead by 22 points. So the bottom line is this. At this particular point, the ball may be on the ground, but the Democrats have not picked up the ball and running with it. If anything, at this particular point, it's the Republicans who are running with the ball on the top issues, the economy, immigration, and crime.
Give some context on this. Compare this when Republicans last took the House.
Yeah, let's compare it back to 2022. I think this kind of gives away the game right here. Okay, the GOP is more trusted than the Dems on the economy. It was 12 points in 2022. Slight decline in that lead, but still 7 points. How about immigration? It was Republicans by 3 back in 2022. Look at this. The Republican lead's actually gone up by 10 points. What are you doing, Democrats? My goodness gracious. And on crime, the Republicans were up by 13, and now they're up by 20.
What the hell? What the hell? Is my understanding of my country just radically different? Well, that is amazing. Even the economy one is amazing to me, considering your bills have increased significantly. Your the tariffs have increased the amount and the cost of inflation. The dollar has gone down in value, meaning you're paying more at the grocery store. And yet, even on the economy, Republicans take it. Immigration, you have ICE raids where they are literally taking people who are legal and breaking down their doors. They're up by like 20 points. What am I missing? And we have about, what time is it? We have about 5 minutes. Give me your thoughts on this. Am I missing something fundamentally about my country that I just...
Yes, you are missing something.
Please.
You're missing you're missing a counter narrative from the Democrats. You know this because you've heard me say this for a couple of years.
Yes.
Well, since 24. Kamala Harris lost because she had no message. Kamala Harris lost because she offered no substantive policy-based alternative. The Democrats keep telling you Donald Trump is a fool. We know that. He says that to us every day. What are you going to do to bring down the price of bread? Richie Torres, what are you going to do to provide health care? Hakeem Jeffries, what are you going to do to improve the schools in my district? Gregory Meeks, continuing to tell me that the Epstein files need to be released. Yes, that is important. Yes, those women were victimized, but that's not going to secure my job.
Yes.
So and on immigration, Barack Obama was the deporter in chief. So there are a lot of similarities between the Republican messaging and Democratic support and action. But so long as the Democrats stay stuck on Epstein, they're stuck on stupid. People have a tendency to vote for things, not against things. And you're not giving anybody anything of substance to vote for other than I'm not him. Charlie Kirk is a perfect example. They needed to come out and say, with all due respect, no one deserves to be assassinated, but Charlie Kirk was a racist, xenophobic bigot. And they needed to just use his own words as evidence of that point. Black people are going into urban centers and marauding around the cities, targeting white people just for fun. Everybody knows that. Charlie Kirk said that. Why aren't the Democrats everywhere saying, folks, asking Cox from Utah, do you believe that? Do you think this is true? Do you stand behind this statement? They have allowed the Republicans to seize the narrative, even on a racist, xenophobic bigot.
Yes.
If you can't make that argument, you don't need to be in the argument. Oh, well, we can't speak ill of the dead. I treat you in death the way you operated in life. They can't highlight. Donald Trump came out and said he hates his opposition. An American president came out yesterday and said he hates other Americans. You can't seize on that? Richie Torres? You're backing genocide? Hakeem Jeffries? Really? Come on, man. This is not that complex.
Yeah.
This is not that complex. It's incredibly disturbing, but it's not that the level of incompetence and idiocy that these Democrats are displaying is nauseating. Dr. King, what did he say about Dr. King? He didn't say he was evil. He said he was. Well,
no, I have the clip. I didn't pull the clip up, but I have the clip. It's something basically that he doesn't deserve a holiday. He doesn't, he shouldn't be a civil rights, all of this other stuff. Anyhow, he was even against the Civil Rights Act. But by the way, they're trying to claim that he's a civil rights leader with this grotesque picture of him shaking hands with Malcolm X in heaven, as if these things are somewhat of a one-to-one. Malcolm X was spit on him as
they
supposed to be inclined to shake his hand.
They should be everywhere, highlighting they don't give a damn about Charlie Kirk. They see this as a galvanizing opportunity to solidify their message amongst the under 30 crowd.
Yes.
And the Democrats, with all the money they have and all the consultants, you can't figure out how to try countering the message with the truth. Try the truth.
Dr. Leon, you have my complete agreement. They don't seem to be able to do that. And so you get polling exactly like that. I got to run. Thank you for this, man. You be safe, okay? And I'll give you a bio as you're on your way out. You have a good one. Be safe.
Thanks, bro.
All right.
All right. Take care.
Dr. Wilmer Leon. Come on, there we are. Dr. Wilmer Leon. And just to give his bio, Dr. Wilmer Leon, he is radio host, political scientist, nationally syndicated columnist, host of Connecting the Dots. You can check him out on his YouTube channel. He is fantastic, and he has my deepest appreciation for joining me. I am going to go to my next guest. We are joined. Let me bring him in first. I don't want to have his name up. Dr. David Hundeyin. David Hundeyin. He is an investigative journalist, author, filmmaker, founder of West Africa Weekly, and the 2023 James Curry Fellow at Cambridge University. David, welcome to the show, man. Thank you for joining me again. I really appreciate it. I always enjoy these talks, which is why I continuously invite you. Thank you for this.
Thank you for having me.
So, you brought up something that I didn't quite understand what was going on, and I'm glad you brought it up because you're giving context on it. And this came out yesterday. I'm sorry for using the BBC for this, but is what it is. Let's just go with it. West African countries to quit the International Criminal Court, and if I'm not mistaken, also the ICJ. These are the Sahel states, of course. Jesus, I'm sorry. There's stuff going on in the background that's kind of disassociating me. But this is Burkina Faso, Niger, and there's one more. What am I missing?
Niger.
No, I said Niger. It was Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali.
And
Those were the
Mali.
three. So why are they doing this? What is the objective of backing out of the International Criminal Court, the ICJ? And what is the plan here around it?
Okay, so first of all, it's it's the ICC that they're exiting, not the
I thought they were
ICC.
okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. The ICC.
Yeah, so it's the ICC, the so-called Rome Statutes, the International Criminal Court. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with the ICC, but first of all, it's not an institution that has the entire world inside it. So
Kind of.
some
The
very
US
notable countries. Yeah, the US is not an accessory to the ICC. Israel also is not. And essentially, if you look at the prosecution records, like people who have actually been held before the ICC, it's very difficult to not reach the conclusion that the only purpose of the ICC is to go after Africans, because the vast majority of those who have been prosecuted at the ICC have been Africans. In fact, I believe it was Senator Mitch McConnell. I'm not 100% sure about this, so please fact check me here. But sometime over the past year, a prominent U.S. senator, when commenting on the ICC's attempted prosecution of Israel for genocide, said, and I quote, that the ICC is not for prosecuting countries like Israel or the U.S. That the ICC is for Myanmar and African countries. That's who the ICC is for. So countries like Israel, they have their own internal criminal processes, which apparently are stronger than those of the ICC. So in other words, countries like the US and Israel are basically to be allowed to investigate themselves, to try themselves and clear themselves, because they are effectively above the ICC, right? And if you also recall, Donald Trump has actually imposed sanctions against the ICC for daring to not even successfully prosecute Israel, because there hasn't even been a successful prosecution yet, just basically an indictment, or just basically stating that Israel is potentially indictable for the crime of genocide, right? Which is not the same thing as saying that Israel has committed genocide, but just the legal preamble that already has sparked such a furious response from Washington. Trump sanctioned the ICC to its eyeballs, to the point where the chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, if you recall, has been locked out of all his email addresses, because under US sanctions, no US internet, no US tech company is allowed to work with him. So he's been locked out of his email accounts. The ICC can no longer function properly because they've been locked out of their Microsoft Enterprise email accounts. He's also been locked out of his bank accounts. And this is especially crazy because this Karim Khan is a British citizen who lives in the UK. But because of US sanctions, British banks have cut ties with him. Right. So when you have an institution which very clearly the sort of imperial superstructure has no regard for and seems to think of it as a sort of lapdog whose job it is to go after people in the global south, then it makes sense for an emerging supranational institution like the Alliance of Sahelian States, which obviously sees sovereignty as its primary goal, to leave the ICC and to create its own alternative, which it is doing. It's we're not sure what the name of the new organization is, but we're hearing it's going to be called the Sahelian Criminal Courts. So the idea is basically that they are leaving this neo-colonial institution which exists to essentially be used as a sort of sword of Damocles hanging over the heads of African leaders. And they're creating their own sovereign institution that actually has teeth and that actually does what it's supposed to do. Why that is also important, apart from the fact that the ICC has been used primarily to go after Africans and nobody else, why that is also important is that in the process of going after African leaders and prominent people who may or may not have done the things that they're accused of. ICC prosecution has also become a sort of political tool. So if you recall, in 2007, when there was severe post-election violence in Kenya, some of those who were identified as sort of key suspects in planning and funding the execution of this violence were taken before the ICC. One of them was a guy you might know called William Samoei Ruto, who is now the president of Kenya. He was taken before he was taken before the ICC, and the only reason he wasn't convicted, the only reason his case didn't end in a conviction, was that the 7 key witnesses in his case all dropped dead, one after the other. You can fact check this. This happened. All the witnesses started dropping dead, one after the other, and the case basically fell apart because there were no witnesses because they were all dead. And this guy, from that sort of very sketchy background in 2007, ran in the 2022 Kenyan election. By that point, he had become the deputy president of Kenya. And by that point, he had also become very friendly with the US embassy in Kenya. I'm sure you get where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
so
I do.
Basically, this prosecution, which wasn't progressed beyond that point, right? Because the case was basically thrown out, which he, then went to town crowing about it as though he was acquitted. He was not. But if you're not familiar with the case details, you think he was acquitted. He categorically was not. So basically, partially with the influence of the U.S. government, potentially what we're looking at here is someone whose case, in addition to having witnesses drop dead, the case was also intentionally bungled, and he was able to come back to Kenya, to hero's welcome, and eventually become president. And as I'm sure you're very well aware of now, this is probably, I think after Nigeria's president, is probably the most faithful U.S. vassal president on the entire continent of Africa. This is someone who is allowing Kenyan police officers to be used as a proxy occupation force being paid by the U.S. government in Haiti. Right. This is someone who, under his leadership, Kenya has been designated as a major non-NATO ally. You know what that means? It's essentially a very big U.S. military base in East Africa. Essentially, this is someone under whose leadership it's become clear that the internal policy decisions that are taken are not necessarily taken with any sort of consideration of local context or anything. It's whatever the IMF prescribes. This is carried out faithfully to the letter. So the so-called Gen Z protests last year, which you recall in Kenya, where dozens of people died, what actually sparked those protests? The finance bill, right? It was basically a tax bill that was, to all intents and purposes, dictated directly from the IMF. And if you read, this document is available online, by the way. It's on the IMF website. If you read, this was January 2024, a full 6 months before the protests, before the riots. It states in this document, this country document for Kenya, that these proposals will likely lead to social unrest. Like it states that in black and white. And then the recommended response is push through the policy anyway. So in other words, we know that people are going to hit the streets. We know that people are potentially going to die, but it doesn't matter. Push it through anyway. And that's exactly what he did. And in the process of pushing it through, those incredible scenes of police brutality and violence that you saw, what you may not know is that a lot of the hardware that was being used to repress Kenyans in the streets, so those infantry fighting vehicles with water cannons, that was all American gear, right? Some of those cops all dressed up like GI Joes. They were walking around with US flag patches on their uniforms because that equipment and gear was supplied by the US government, right? So basically, military-grade tactical gear was supplied to the Kenyan government to use on civilian protesters under the age of 25, right? So that's what having the ICC as this huge hammer dangling over the head of African leaders can contribute to a situation where a head of state or a president can be used as a puppet, can be essentially blackmailed using what he may or may not have done as a bargaining chip with regard to ICC prosecution. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for the Sahelian Alliance to pull out of the entire thing. I'm not entirely sure that a Sahelian court is, I mean, it's a good start. I'm not sure that's sufficient for the purposes of handling any potential, what's the word I'm looking for? Transnational criminal cases, especially where those relate to countries not necessarily within the AES. I think ultimately, the solution will still lie at a Pan-African level. I think there needs to be an African criminal court, which, by the way, is something that is supposed to, according to the AU's charter, is something that is supposed to exist, but still doesn't exist in any meaningful sense yet. So the AES is definitely heading in the right direction, but at the end of the day, it's just 3 countries in a 3-country union.
Real quick, is the purpose of this to expand other countries? Meaning their expectation is there will be other countries that join this alliance, and joining the Sahel states, we will need a transnational capability of judicial overview. Well,
I think based on what they've said, I think the idea is that the doors are open, right?
Okay.
So they are not necessarily seeking to expand in an aggressive sense, but the neighbors are welcome to join in, provided that they sort of sing from the same crib sheet, provided that they understand what the purpose of the AES is, that the primary problem, political and economic, lies in the role that colonial institutions and so-called colonial masters continue to play in that region. So there have been overtures that have been made to countries like Guinea, for example. Guinea is to the west of the AES. Guinea used to have relatively close relations with the AES, but for whatever reason, the person who's in charge there, the president there, appears to be very, very closely French aligned. In fact, his wife is just very interesting bit of trivia here. His wife is a white Jewish French woman, a policewoman from France. Just very interesting bit of trivia there. So they're not really on board with each other like that anymore. However, similar overtures have been made to Togo, which is also a border state of the AES. It's also a coastal state. In fact, there was a period where Togo was effectively the de facto port of the AES. A lot of their international trade was happening through Togo. Nowadays, that has shifted more toward Ghana. Ghana is a lot friendlier nowadays, and obviously, Ghana has much bigger capacity to handle the size of cargoes that 3 countries will need. So, but basically, the idea is that the invitation is open, the doors are open. If you so decide that you are tired of existing under this colonial yoke, which is going to ensure that you remain poor and underdeveloped forever, then come join with us, right? Because if you rebel individually, you can be put down individually, which is what has happened before, right? But if you break out of your foreign domination, be that French, be that Portuguese, be that American, then this is how you maintain that newfound sovereignty. You come partner with us, and we can all share resources. We can all share intelligence. We can all share security resources. We can share. We can engage in group economics. We can do a bunch of things that makes life easier for each other. So that's basically what the goal is.
Explain something to me. What's the benefit of remaining under French, even indirect colonial yoke? Like, for example, when you point out either Togo or you point out another country that may be still closely associated with France, the one with the president with the wife from France, for example, what's the motivation? I mean, is it just individual benefits that screw over the country? Because I don't get the sense that the countries are on board for it. They seem to be against this notion of any kind of even indirect colonial.
So the French-speaking countries in Africa have a very weird political situation. It's a situation where the vast majority of the population actually deeply resents French domination, and they can see it in a very visceral way. In some countries, like in Cote d'Ivoire, I don't know if that's the case now, but when last I visited in 2021, you could actually see French soldiers on the streets doing stop and search operations on Ivorian personal vehicles and whatnot. I saw that with my two eyes, white soldiers doing that. So, and the sense I got is people were deeply, there was a deep sense of humiliation, a deep sense of rage, that we're supposed to be an independent country, and yet we clearly are not. So that sentiment in the public space definitely exists. However, the people who are the leaders or the heads of states are uniquely repressive. Even by African standards, they're uniquely repressive. And that repression doesn't just exist in a vacuum. That's a repression that is enabled and sometimes instigated at every level by the French government. So basically, if you're the head of states in a country like Togo, you're not the head of state because the people want you to be there. You're not the head of state because there's any real connection between you and the country that you're governing. You're there because you're the French colonial overseer. And the people realize that the minute they rebel against you, the minute they step out of line, the minute they decide to, flex their sovereignty in any meaningful way, you're going to send soldiers into the street to shoot them down. And if you don't have enough soldiers to do that, the French government is going to fly in French gendarmes who are going to do the dirty job for you. This is not just me talking. This happened in Cote d'Ivoire. I believe it was in 2010, was it 2012? 2010, when the former president, Laurent Gbagbo, who had supposedly just lost the election, was refusing to step aside for Alassane Ouattara, who is still the president now, 15 years later. And you had French commandos marching through the capital, Yamoussoukro, with tanks and everything. They went to the presidential palace. They shelled the presidential palace. They broke in. They physically manhandled this man. They tore the hair off his wife's head. There's a picture on the internet where you can see half of his wife's head there after a French soldier just torn off the hair, and she's like half naked, right? So this is not hypothetical. This is a thing that happened. So even by African standards, the type of repression in these French-speaking countries is it's beyond the pale, right? So in Burkina Faso, for example, prior to the revolution, so the revolution happened in two phases. The first was in 2014, and then the one that brought in Ibrahim Traore in 2022. So what happened in 2014 was the person who had been president for 27 years, a guy called Blaise Compaoré. He was Thomas Sankara's good friend who betrayed him to the French and who basically assassinated Thomas Sankara. And he was in power up until 2014. And then he tried to extend his stay in power, and then there was a protest, a riot thing in the streets. And he actually sent the military into the streets to shoot the people down. And then, for whatever reason, maybe people had just had enough, they didn't stand down. And then eventually the military made a tactical decision for the purpose of avoiding a civil war to ask him to excuse himself instead of, going to war with the people. Right. And that was how Blaise Compaoré fled to Cote d'Ivoire, where he still remains. He's still in exile there. And then a military officer called Jean-Claude Damiba came into power, promising all sorts of things. Those things didn't happen. And then in 2022, when the people had had enough, then there was another popular uprising, and that's how Ibrahim Traore came into power. So the point is, in the French-dominated parts of Africa, a revolution is like what you just saw in Nepal. Even though obviously we know that was called a revolution, but the way it happened, where it started off as people just protesting in the streets, and then the military stood down, and the protesters went on a rampage. That wouldn't happen in French-speaking West Africa. And the reason that wouldn't happen is because the military in those countries, first of all, the military is trained directly by the French military. This is a very interesting question you just asked, because it's going to lead to a segue. One of the interesting things that the AES did shortly after it came into existence was that it created the first officer training school in French-speaking West Africa. Because prior to the AES, if you wanted to become a commissioned officer in any of these French-speaking countries, you had to get your officer training done in France. There was no way for you to do it in your own space.
Oh, Lord.
So essentially, the military elite, which makes up a large part of the political elite in these countries, the military elite was essentially being indoctrinated in France. They're trained according to French military doctrine, according to French political doctrine. So, as I'm sure you also know, a large part of the France-Afrique project wasn't just physical domination for the purpose of extracting resources like with the British. With the French, it was a lot more insidious and a lot more cruel, because one of the things that the French made sure to do was to inculcate this idea in the minds of French-speaking people, not just in Africa, but around the world, wherever the French tried to colonize. I think the only place where this didn't succeed was in Vietnam. But in pretty much every other French colony in the world, the people there genuinely had this idea that they were French.
Interesting.
Right. So, so the French level 1 lives in France. And then you live in Mali, or you live in Cote d'Ivoire, or you live in Congo, you are French level 2. So your dream as someone living in a French level 2 place is to become excellent at something and become recognized, so that you will get on a plane and go to France level 1, right? So, and this was done in so many ways. The school certificate exams that are written, the best students, as a matter of routine, were always taken to France. Right, so the countries had very little opportunity to retain the best of their own talent. Right, so this was a systematic hoovering up of brains, of resources, everything that could be transformational in a country. So your best talent is taken to those countries. Some of these countries didn't, for example, have medical schools. So you wanted to become a doctor, you had to go to France and do your medical training there. Yeah. And then obviously you and I know there's a 50-50 chance that you may not come back.
Yeah, you may not come back. Especially if you're drinking cappuccinos in front of the Eiffel Tower, you're getting your croque monsieur.
Exactly. Yeah. And once that happens, you are basically lost to your country, and you are lost. Your potential is lost. Your productive potential is lost to the place that it comes from. Right? So, and this was done in so many ways. So the military was just another extension of this. So if you wanted to move up from being just a regular non-com to becoming a commissioned officer, you had to go to France, right? Where you would get indoctrinated in the French military doctrine, and they will inculcate their own way of managing the French African Empire into you, and put the idea into your head that the biggest compliment that you can have, the biggest honor you can have, is to oversee this French-speaking territory in partnership with France.
Wow.
So the AES, why the AES is so important to me and to so many people in the region, is that it is not just a repudiation of these very, very bad ideas, but it's a fundamental retooling of the African brain, the African mind that exists across these countries, because a lot of damage has been done to the psyche of these countries. So it's the first real attempt at sovereignty that has existed in these countries for hundreds of years. It's the first time that there's any real meaningful attempt at sovereignty, which is why some of us are so invested in the success of the Sahelian project. And to be fair to them, so far they appear to be ticking all of the boxes. And the exit from the ICC, in my opinion, is just one of the latest good moves that we'll see them making toward this end.
Wow. David, I swear, man, I learn something from you every day. Every time you come on. I will tell you one experience I had when I was in Kenya. My ex-wife and I, God, I don't know the years, it's before 2020. We get to Kenya. We love the place. People speak English, which makes it easy to kind of engage. And I remember having a conversation with a cab driver, and he points out, he says, you know, my friend of mine works in the U.S. military. And I was like, get out of here. What do you mean your friend works in the military? He said, he has a uniform and all. He said, I could take you to the barracks. And I'm like, how on earth is your friend working in the military? He shows me a picture of his friend. And he's right. He's in a U.S. military uniform. And he says, what happens is that the U.S. military effectively pays Kenyan soldiers to go around the world and basically to commit military acts that the U.S. military doesn't want to necessarily do themselves.
Exactly. Such as Haiti.
Yes. But in this case, he was talking about other places as mercenaries. And pay them very well to do very horrible things across the globe. And if you have a country that's relatively poor and you had to feed your wife, you had to feed your kid,
you'll do it.
Here we go. Yeah. I did not know that at the time. I was shocked by that. But I guess this feeds into the whole Kenya-U.S. association thing. David, man, thank you for this. Like I said, I learn something new every time you come on. I really appreciate it. David Hundeyin. He is an investigative journalist, author, filmmaker, founder of West Africa Weekly, and 2023 James Carey Fellow at Cambridge University. By the way, David, is there anywhere else that the people can find you? I want to make sure I have it. Have everywhere.
You can find me on Twitter at David Hundeyin. That's my name. You can find me on Instagram, same handle. LinkedIn, I don't know why you'd want to find me on LinkedIn, but if you search my name, it's there.
Right. Does anybody really use LinkedIn? I don't know anybody who uses that, even though everybody has an account.
And then the platform that I founded is called West Africa Weekly. So that's westafricaweekly.com.
Okay. My man.
That's it.
Thank you for this. You be safe, okay? Have a good rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, you too. Yeah.
All right. God, man, I enjoy these conversations. I learn something new in these conversations, which is why I enjoy them so much. And the Sahel states has generated a lot of energy and a lot of good energy. You know, I think what it is, most of the time when we're talking about stuff, it's stuff that seems intractable. It's stuff that seems a negative, that people are getting murdered, people are getting killed, bad things are happening around the globe. And whereas we can't see around corners, meaning you can only evaluate how far you can see in advance and based on historical context about whether or not that's going to change or what you think is going to take place based on historical context. So if there is a corner somewhere that you just immediately hit, there will be no way for you to know that corner is there. There may be prophets among us that can find that stuff, but for all intents and purposes, us normal human beings can't do that. The Sahel states is a bright spot. That is a situation where the people seem to be taking it seriously and seem to be making moves for the betterment of the people in those countries. And you would hope, especially after being given that rundown of the way France still exerts control over many of these countries, that it spreads. They have my fervent prayer that it spreads. What time is it? All right. We are going to be joined with, oh, he's late. He's not usually late. Let me make sure. He was on vacation. Arnaud Develay. Oh, there he is. There he is. Let me bring him on. My man, immediately off vacation, looking very well rested, looking very tan. Arnaud Develay, how you doing, man? You doing okay this morning? Well, this evening for you, this afternoon for you.
I'm doing fine, Jamal. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm
still jet lagged. Sorry.
Yeah, I know, right? Arnaud, he is a author, political analyst, international lawyer, specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. Arnaud, you've come back into, I a hellscape, and a hellscape does a different word I want to use for it. I want to use FS for it, but I'll try to be polite. All of these European leaders have lost their minds. They are screaming bloody murder about false flags. And just to give some kind of context, so the audience, why do I have this picture of Bridget Macron up? Let me get rid of her. So just to give some context, just over the last week and at the UN, they have been screaming that Russia has been invading their space, has sent, right here, they've said that Putin sent bright lights hovering over airports in Oslo and Copenhagen. They've said that he has sent airplanes flying to Estonia. They've said that he has dropped a bomb on a house in Poland, which wasn't from the Russians. It was from Poland's failed air defense efforts. And of course, drones that had no ammunition associated with it, basically dummy drones, were apparently flying through Poland. By the way, notified by Belarus to give the Polish a heads up that they were coming into the area. Some of these seem like false flags because some of these seem like they were just planted, just taken off of a truck, dropped in and say, oh my God, look at what the Russians did. And now they're at the United Nations screaming bloody murder with Poland saying, we will shoot down the next plane that comes into the Polish airspace. Okay, there hasn't been no planes going into Polish airspace, and you had a difficulty shooting down the dummy drones. So calm down with this boisterousness. And the same thing with Estonia. It's like, we'll shoot down the next thing that goes to Estonian airspace. For one, those planes didn't go through Estonia airspace. They were in a corridor that was in open territory. But they are doing this for reasons. And it has to be for some reason that they're creating this provocative language that is coming out of them, which honestly, the fact that Poland couldn't shoot down dummy drones should have told them this is not the course of action to take. Give me your thoughts on this. Why do you think that they're being this provocative with their language?
Well, I think one word, relevance. They're trying to remain relevant by any stretch, by hooks and crannies and whatever have you. I mean, you have the UNGA, as you alluded to. He's starting, I think, today or yesterday.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And there's a lot of thematics, a lot of theatrics. It's the diplomatic Super Bowl season, so to speak. So in as far as the Ukraine conflict is concerned, this is par for the course to ramp up the rhetoric, come up with as many outlandish claims and accusations. And this is what we're seeing now. It's nothing really out of the ordinary when one looks at the Ukraine conflict in its entirety, which is all about media theatrics and hyperbolics, essentially. So, and don't forget also that the military situation is really starting looking ominous now.
Yeah.
With reports that we may just be witnessing something that, it's almost like the boy that cried wolf. We've warned that it's a juggernaut is pressing westward, probing systematically throughout the contact line, in the face of a Ukraine army which operates at some recently said 47% of its own capacities as far as rotation is concerned. Others have said now it's lower than that. So and all this against the backdrop of people being literally pulled off the streets, screaming and yelling by people who are seemingly, drawn out to do so. And so it's the apocalypse. It's the Gotham Damarung, the dusk of the gods. It's almost about to get really, really ugly now. But how history never really repeats itself. It's looking more and more, and I don't mean to demean or underscore. I mean under value the sheer loss of life, and because we haven't really begun to, and this will obviously be front and center down the road, and down the weeks and months and years, about this awful cost of life. I mean, we are really tearing Europe's heart, literally, out of his own chest. Who's going to rebuild Ukraine when everything is said and done? No matter what the peace looks like, you know. So yeah, and we're seeing this. We're seeing this somewhat awful situation unravel before our eyes. But until then, you know, and before we take stock of this, we're witnessing this kind of grotesque. It gets increasingly grotesque every day. Those people just don't know how to quit, and this is actually what really makes me, I'll be honest, vomit, because it's like it's turning into a macabre fan fest. You know, this kind of being at the game and cheering on a team, even though that team has utterly lost the game. It's clear by now, but you know, people still go on, and it's I guess it's characteristics of this period we're living through right now. And so yeah, this is, you know, this is what really what I get out of this sense of unease, because it's not funny anymore. It might have been somewhat amusing, you know, 3 years ago. We all remember how they also tried, involving also Poland at the time, to try to say that a Russian missile,
Yes.
at a, you know, so it's kind of the same, but kind of like tired by now, you know, because it's just too much of it in such a short amount of time. And it really underscores the fact that, you know, the game is up, that the dam is about to break, and it's going to be just tremendous, because, you know, we've had such this attrition rate like conflict for the last 3 years, and things are about to really get dramatic, you know, soon,
Yeah.
like imminently. When exactly, I don't know. But it's there. We can feel it. It's just about the burst. The dam is about to burst any day now. And so they're scrambling. Yeah, they're scrambling, and you know, it's like they're in denial. They're in this kind of hysteria induced trance, and so they're coming up with all those nonsensical stories, and it's just piling up one on top of the other,
Oh,
in
my
a way
friend,
that the prior one hasn't even had time to affect itself, you know, make an impact, that they're trotting out another one, and yet another one, like pearls. It's just like,
well, that's my
but
point.
UNGA, keep in mind UNGA. This is UNGA time right now.
No,
It's like the in Hollywood, the award season,
Oscars.
where
It's
that's right,
like it's like
Oscars,
looking at fabulous
Grammys,
dress, right?
People's Choice
Um,
Awards, yes, the whole thing.
I think I slightly disagree with you on this one, because I think they do get it. I don't think they're in denial. I think if they were in denial, I don't think they would be doing this. I think they're doing this explicitly because they know, as you keep pointing out, that they are tremors of something that's coming. This dam is about to break on some level, that the military of Ukraine is getting more fraught. And you can see it just in the way that the Russian military is moving and making gains, where you might have had, you know, they move a few kilometers over a couple of weeks. That pace is ever increasing, where Ukraine has an inability to cover their gaps in a way that they didn't have prior. This is Poland, by the way. Listen to what he says here. And again, I'm glad you brought up the missile that fell on the farmers and killed the farmers. That was a Ukrainian missile. It was a Polish bomb that fell on whatever house that this guy came out and tried to blame Russia for the very next day. Oh, by the way, it was a Polish missile. Listen to what he says here, because the hysteria is over the top.
I have only one request to the Russian government. If another missile or aircraft enters our space without permission, deliberately or by mistake, and gets shot down and the wreckage falls on NATO territory, please don't come here to whine.
Now, for one, there has been no aircraft that has gone through Polish airspace. They were dummy drones, like literally dummy drones, that they had a difficult time shooting down dummy drones. And you get the Estonian leadership being even more ridiculous. And I'm not shocked by this, because this is where Kayla's comes from. She was very elegantly dressed, very attractive. But I swear to God, Estonia is Planet of the Apes. So this is them putting out aircraft showing, this is supposed to be evidence, by the way. This is a Google picture, just so the audience will know. This is them taking a photo on Google saying, this is the Russian aircraft that invaded our airspace. These people are idiots. Again, this is Kalis's place, so don't be shocked by the fact that they're idiots. But this is them saying, this was the area to which the Russian aircraft invaded. This was not Estonian airspace. It wasn't. I think they're doing this because they get it in the same way that I think we're getting it, where there's this feel that the Ukrainian military has lost the capacity to maintain this fight in a way, and that they fear tremors of something coming. I guess the main question is, do you think that this is all them gearing up for false flag, where all of this, the pearls that they're stringing along, oh, look at Russia invading our airspace. Oh my God, they're drones in Copenhagen that is holding a Russian passport. So we know that they're coming from Russia. Oh my God, look at this airplane that we got on Google Earth that we were saying invaded Estonian airspace. Look at the bomb that dropped that was from Poland, but we're going to blame the Russians for it anyway. That they're trying to set up a false flag event to justify some kind of military engagement with European states, if not NATO itself. Give me your thoughts. Because, by the way, just to piggyback on that, they would prefer, I would imagine, the Ukrainian military to still exist if they get involved. Like, I don't think they want the Ukrainian military to collapse, and then they have to put in European military, and European military is the only thing that's left standing. They would have to get involved while the Ukrainian military is still on its feet, even if it is down to 43% capacity. Give me your thoughts, though. What do you think? Am I being too cynical?
First of all, before I answer, the Polish representative, I don't have my glasses on. Was that Sikorski?
Yeah, that was the source. Yes, that was him.
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, that kind of sums it all up then. Sikorski is the husband of Anne Applebaum. Anne Applebaum is the woman who basically took the Russiagate hoax into America 1 month after it was first published in a Soros-financed Ukrainian weekly. I'm talking about Paul Manafort here and the Black Ledger. So, okay. And Sikorski is the same guy who tweeted before retiring, withdrawing the tweet about the well done America when we see the Nord Stream 2 explosion bubbling up at the surface. So that's Sikorski. Yeah, that's him. This guy is
thanks America. Thanks America.
Yeah, he's married to a neocon, a arch neocon at that. So he's completely he's a traitor. He's a shame. He's a disgrace, and he's part of that. Rumsfeld would have loved him 20 years ago. He's part of that new Europe, quisling crowd who sells his own country, and marries into the war hawks of the United States crowd. So he's a nobody. He's a despicable character. So I'm not really surprised that he would be trotted out as one of the main, proper off, of those conspiracy theories, and because this is actually what it is here. These really are conspiracy theories. But to answer your question, yes, I completely wholeheartedly agree. I think they're trying to set the frame, set the tone, plant the background for a potential false flag, which would allow the Article 4 discussion to evolve into a full-on Article 5 debate. We're in that territory right now, because remember that if the front collapses, it's by any other stretch of the imagination, it's game over. It would be even worse than Trump being serious about putting an end to the war by cutting off financial, intelligence, and material supplies to Ukraine. So, and then Europe would be the EU project as such, which is let's not forget, it's a globalist project. It's a neoliberal Davos-like project. It has nothing to do with European people's aspirations. So, but that would be disastrous for them because they're not ready. Yes, they do want to send over their own to replace the Ukrainians. Make no mistake about it. That's the plan. But they're not ready yet. They are not ready yet. And so they are facing with the prospect of having to be confronted to their own populations for that kind of in between time between the de facto imposed by Russia by force of arms ignominious defeat into Ukraine of the Ukraine project, but above and beyond that, the neo-colonial Ukraine project, which is also girded by people like the Khodorkovsky of the world, the Berezovsky of the world, William Broder of the world. I mean, make no mistake about it. Behind the Starmer and people like this, you've got those investment funds. You've got those people. Those people who, it's not like they never had it. They've had it, and they allowed it to slip out of their hands. So this is what drives them crazy. They cannot forgive themselves over that. Every day that they wake up, to quote Nicolas Sarkozy before he was elected, somebody was asking, "Do you dream about being president?" Every day in the morning when I shave, he said. I look at myself in the mirror, I'm shaving, and I'm thinking about it. This is the type of same thing about those guys. They want to repair, they want to redeem themselves, and they want to inflict, with a sense of vengeance, a strategic defeat onto Russia, seize its resources, slice the country apart, punish the people. They long for those days when Russians were, lining up for soup outside, and they want to grind it into the ground. They want to humiliate the Slavic people. That's what they want. And so Sikorsky, yeah, he's part of that crowd. That's who he is. Anne Applebaum, it's Colombia. She's a plant, a neocon plant in Colombia. She's writing all the time for Commentary magazine. I know those people. I've known them for 20 years, going back to the Iraq War. I met first time I met one of them was in 1999 in DC. I was attending a symposium, and we had a series of speakers, coming and blah blah doing their thing, until we saw that guy walking in. His name was Peter Rodman. He worked for the Nixon Institute. A lunatic. And that was the first time I was confronted 2 years before 9/11 to a neocon. And I asked the guy who organized the symposium at the time, what did we just witness here? He said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Those people are not serious. They're just kind of."
Oh, they're dead serious.
Yeah.
Oh, they're dead serious.
And the world found out officially 2 years later when they invested the Bush administration what the neocon was all about, with the Richard Pearl and the Paul Wolfowitz of the world. So what we're seeing now is they're kind of like a generational progeny, and allies, because they have allies in Rumsfeld, New Europe, which was instrumental also in getting this coalition of the willing back in 2003. Remember, Ukraine was part of that coalition. Poland was part of that coalition.
Those psychopaths should be the first ones to go if they want to start a war. And they've forgotten, like, it seems that many of these European states forgotten that they were conquered fully. Like France, it's like Sacre Bleu, we've been taken by the Nazis in 24 hours. And it may have been 48 hours, but it was pretty close. Britain was almost annihilated. And I'm trying to make the point. Yeah, like literally on the beach. They seem to have forgotten the toll and the reality of war, especially in the context where they seem radically unprepared for any kind of conflict with the Russians. They have filled 2-3 militaries in Ukraine, and all of them have been smashed. And it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, they've already told the UK that they couldn't put 40,000 troops if they needed to. And 40,000 troops is maybe a week's worth if you're talking about the Ukrainians' capabilities, which I would even go so far as to say go beyond the European capabilities of many of these states. Like, why are they so fervently ready to feed their population to the Russians? Because that seems to be what is taking place. And do you think, what time is it? We're about 4 minutes. Do you think that in their minds, they're thinking to themselves, the U.S. came to our rescue in the Second World War, and the U.S. will come to our rescue again? Is that what you think is really like in the back of their minds? That even if we put out a group of people that get basically killed by the Russians because we put them in Ukraine, they were fair targets, that the U.S. wouldn't be able to stand on the sidelines? And so ultimately, they're willing to put a tripwire out, knowing or with the belief that the United States, Donald Trump, Daddy, will come to our rescue. Because otherwise, I don't know what they're doing.
Well, I mean, you're alluding to the game plan. This is the game plan. They want to send Europe into the dog, they want to destroy Europe essentially.
Yes,
You know?
which is what would happen.
Yeah, they want to utterly destroy Europe. They hope that in the process, a substantial part of Russia, its western part, west of the Euro, would be also burnt, so that they could somehow scoop out all the reconstruction contract. It's that same old playbook, right? But ultimately, what they don't understand is that it's not because you're standing one ocean away from the continent that this time around you're not going to experience it firsthand. We're not in World War II anymore. We're dealing in a world where Russia can retaliate to the real decision makers,
Yes.
5,000-6,000 miles away, with some of the most efficient vectors and reach everywhere. So they just seem to be living in this kind of nostalgia, World War II, and as if Russia was comparable to Nazi Germany to begin with. So they still live in this old trope, And as far as the European leaders, quote and unquote, big quotes, we're not their population. They are agents. They've been placed there. They don't represent, I mean, 80 years ago, we were dealing with a failed generation of leaders, but they were still somewhat leaders because we were still at the nation state, within the nation state era. Today, the nation state has become captive of transnational economic interests. So all the Macron and Starmer and Merz, BlackRock, Merz, they're all emanations of those transnational financial interests. They in no way represent. They don't have the talent. They don't have the culture. They don't have the gravita. They don't understand what building a political force and standing to for certain principle is all about. Right or wrong. After that, it's for the people to decide. But that class of politicians in Europe has disappeared, I would say, about 25 years ago, with the retirement of Chirac and Schroeder and people like this. Merkel might have somehow tried to create the illusion that she was the last remnant of that Mutti Merkel. But now we know that she just, history will damn her, because she, along with Holland, participated in this charade of Minsk. So she will end up in the dustbin of history. All of them will.
Yes. Yeah.
But in the meantime, those people are so full of themselves that they want to remain relevant. They want to remain relevant because they are deluded, they are conceited, and also because they owe the people who put them in charge. And so they're willing to basically compensate and double down in what is expected from them, so they can get like a good grade card. This is what it's all about. And that's dangerous, very dangerous.
They're not ready. They're not ready. 1.7 million Ukrainians have died. Europe is not ready, but we'll see. Arnaud, man, thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. And I always enjoy these conversations. Arnaud Develay, he is an author, political analyst, international lawyer specializing in international criminal law. His latest book, Foreign Entanglements, Biden, Ukraine, and the Fracturing of America's Political Consensus. Definitely check that book out. You be safe, man. You have a good rest of your day, okay?
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yeah, they are, Angela Merkel would not be seen favorably for getting Europe into this. And God, man, Estonians are dumb as a box of rocks. Like, this picture, the idea that you sit here, hold up a picture and say, this is the Russian jet. This is a fighter that invaded our airspace. It's like, dude, are you serious right now? Did you just take a picture off of Google and put that up there as your fighter jet? Okay. I want to go to my guest, though. I am joined with the man himself, Ford Fischer. Ford, I don't think I've ever had you on this channel. And so I'm glad that you joined me, man. Thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Good morning.
And just so the audience will know, Ford Fischer, he is right here. Independent journalist, videographer, editor, computer scientist, web designer. His work has been featured on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, and more. Hell, you were even featured on Congress, despite the fact that they took your channel down for a while for the January 6th photography.
demonetized my channel, I will say. They took some of the content down and they demonetized it. The channel survived, and when enough people spoke out, I mean, it's a testament to the power of activism. When enough people got mad about it, they did call it an over-enforcement and gave me the monetization back.
Do you know they did the same thing to my channel at the exact same time? And they sent me that same letter saying, we over-enforced our policy. And it's like, what the hell does that mean? How do you over-enforce?
It's a very, very strange term. And I think it's so clear that what over-enforced means is sort of like, we realized that there was public outcry about this, right? It's what disturbed me about it is that the over-enforcement should be fixed no matter how popular the person is. And there are certainly people who are affected by that kind of enforcement mechanism that have no resolve whatsoever. No way to.
I mean, even the premise of over-enforcement. Well, how do you over-enforce? Like, it's just either you have rules that are clear-cut or you don't. And the people, like, I take great issue when, let's say you're videotaping January 6th and you are filming reality. This is the reality of what was taking place. And they're like, we don't want America to see that reality, so we need to take your video down. Or we need to demonetize your channel to try to lessen the number of people who would see it or disincentivize you from putting it up. That's outrageous. That's outrageous.
Yeah, their premise, like because they actually did provide a human explanation of it. What they claimed is that even though my footage was just raw, here's exactly what happened, that because people in it, namely at the time, the president of the United States, Trump, made claims of outcome determinative election fraud, which were considered to be false. Therefore, because I did not basically declaratively make a statement that statements made in my video are false, that I'm allowing the president to speak in my video, and therefore that the video contains election disinformation. There was it was Inauguration Day at precisely 2 weeks after January 6th that I received a suspension, and the reason for that was I was filming protesters at the inauguration, and there was a guy and these protesters were like anti-LGBT, like that kind of thing. And there was literally a shirtless man yelled at them from across the street. I remember the words exactly how they were said because I watched it so many times because of this issue. He said, "I still believe the election was stolen, but you, sir, are preaching the wrong form of Christianity." That was the sentence that the man said that I got suspended for filming him saying. And their reasoning was him saying the words, "I still believe the election was stolen," constituted election disinformation that was inside of my video. So if one person, right, if you're trying to get someone banned off YouTube, right, someone's filming you and you don't want them filming, just yell "election stolen," right? Maybe YouTube will take it.
That's outrageous. Some random protest. That is outrageous.
Guy, yeah.
Did they reinstall your channel? Did they take away that suspension, or they kept that suspension on?
So that suspension this is a little bit in the weeds, but the suspension was permanent. I'm sorry, the suspension was temporary already. The suspension was already not going to be permanent. And the reason it was a suspension rather than a warning, they considered it a second strike because of another warning, which was also for filming live on January 6th. And I did actually manage to communicate with people at YouTube who agreed that the underlying first warning had been wrong and did ultimately void all of the enforcement mechanisms. But again, it was interesting because those remedies of me like really being able to have a back and forth conversation with them was clearly because I had made it a viral subject, right? If I didn't have a large audience that would have advocated for me, then it would have been impossible to do that kind of arguing in the first place, to even have them listen to you.
God, man, the faceless entity thing is terrifying.
And especially when it's robots doing the enforcement, right? Like they never acknowledge this, but my belief is that it probably is based on essentially a transcription, right? Like a computer sees all of the words that are said in it, and that's why it's devoid of context. It's not thinking about the difference between like you and me having a conversation. I'm responsible for the words I say. You're responsible for the words you say. But there's a difference in context when I just quoted somebody saying something. It's different than if I were saying it because it's my own thought, right? A computer doesn't understand that the way that a human would, the way that your audience would.
And it's ironic because YouTube lives off of what is the section? Oh God, I haven't hit this thing for so
230.
long.
I'm sure that's what you're
Section 230, which means that if somebody says something on the platform, YouTube doesn't get in trouble for the thing that the person said on the platform. And
Correct.
yet, when somebody says something in the video, YouTube will still ding you for it. And it's like, are you serious right now? Like, it's the faceless entity where you're working on a platform to make a living off that platform, but you have no idea. Any random day say, hey, we found a video of yours from 3 years ago where Rando said this, and so we're taking your channel down. It's like,
yeah,
are you serious?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a good analogy, right? The analogous Section 230 protection would be that if I film someone saying something, I shouldn't be held to account the same way as if I said the thing, right?
Exactly.
Because you're right, the companies benefit from that same distinction.
Protection. Yeah. For Fischer, I brought you on because I saw this video that you put out. And God, man, the ICE raids have been insane. And there's something else associated with these raids that I want to point out. CNN just did a polling. I don't know if CNN did the polling or reading the polling, but Donald Trump or the Republicans in regards to immigration has gone up like 20 points since the last time they did this particular polling on the issue of immigration. And so the Republicans are beating the Democrats like 33 points or some insane amount of number. And that is despite the fact that things like this were filmed, protests for ICE, because, you know, they're out there just knocking down people's doors and whatnot. Even though the people may be innocent, ICE doesn't seem to care about all of that. And the fact that they're wearing this kind of Gestapo face coverings, get across something. Why can't you show your face? The audience can't see, but there's a priest that got shot in the face.
Right.
Now, you have plenty of these videos. I'm only going to show this one. I mean, I can show the other one where the woman was hit by a truck and then they came out and shot her in the face. The one with Captain America, which was weirder. It's just a little stranger. And you pointed out that they were talking about moving that facility from Chicago to somewhere else, to a more clandestine location where the protests wouldn't keep showing up repeatedly like that. Give me your context. What was taking place on the ground while you were there?
Right. So let me first say, just as part of kind of wider context, I live closer to Washington, D.C., where Trump recently did kind of make these moves to exert a lot more federal control of the district, right? So whereas before there's already tons of different police forces, MPD, Capitol Police, Secret Service, Parks Police, blah, 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 right? They now added the National Guard. And first that was the DC National Guard. Then a bunch of Republican states allowed their National Guards to go. There was also for 1 month the federalization of MPD. So the local cops technically were kind of under the command of Trump. And then there was the deployment of federal agents. And so over the last month, DC has sort of turned into this space where frontline day-to-day law enforcement operations are kind of done more so by the federal government. And a huge portion of why he's doing that is very obviously immigration enforcement. And so you have Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. Often these guys are dressed up as, or I shouldn't say dressed up as, but what they're marked as is DHS or HSI, basically just wider Homeland Security. And clearly the purpose of them is to create a federal presence so that they can then sort of arrest people who they determine to be undocumented. Trump had for a while alluded to the idea that he would make similar moves in Illinois. And sort of a big difference between Washington, D.C. and Illinois is that while D.C. is not a state and does not have states' rights, and so the mayor was really in this kind of in-between place where to some extent she said, we don't want this, but to some extent she said, we welcome it. Illinois, both the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois have been much more ardent that, like, we don't want this. They're signing executive orders saying things like the police are not going to be assisting with ICE, would not be assisting with National Guardsmen. And so Trump sort of backed down in part. Trump did not end up deploying the National Guard, which is something that he said he would do into Illinois. But he did launch what he called Operation Midway Blitz. And basically what this is that he has put a lot of federal agents especially into the Chicago area. But they're acting alone. They are my observation on the ground, but also what I understand to be sort of the policy there is that the police are not assisting them. The feds are doing this. And so what that's looked like in practice over the last couple of weeks, again, my understanding both from news reporting and from speaking to people on the ground there, including families of some of the people who have been picked up this way, is that they have targets that they basically know of, people who either have had visas revoked or for whatever reason they determined to be present illegally. And they're basically showing up in unmarked vehicles, highly militarized appearances, and they hop out, and the whole situation is done in less than 3 minutes. They show up, they grab somebody who is supposed to be allegedly targeted or specifically identified, sort of thrown into a vehicle and then taken somewhere. And so the question kind of is, where are they taken to? And so this particular facility that I was filming these protests at, both of the videos that you just showed, is in Broadview, Illinois. And so this is a suburb of Chicago, roughly 20 or 30 minutes west of downtown Chicago. And vehicles are going in and out of that facility basically all day. That ICE agents and so forth are leaving, and then they're coming back with people who they essentially just captured in the manner that I described to you. And so activists, particularly every Friday, and so now there have been 2 of these inflamed Fridays, and it's actually my intention to go back there in a few days, have been trying to basically be disruptive of it. And so the tactic, although they're not using sort of direct violence, they're not really assaulting the agents, right? Or the tactic is not to like fight them physically, but they are trying to blockade it, where they basically stand in front of the driveway and try to prevent vehicles from going in and out. And while they are certainly overwhelmed with enormous force as they do so, and it would be fantastical to believe that this would actually prevent deportations from taking place, I think it's slowing them down, right? It does appear to be effective in insofar as it's at least causing them to be, literally just slower or disrupted to some degree as they're doing it. Now, the reporting that you're describing, this was a really interesting little nugget of time that happened, is that Sunday night, so placing this in context, this is 2 days after the biggest flare-up, which was Friday. On Sunday night, the Huffington Post reported that they had seen communications from inside DHS showing that the Broadview facility was going to be evacuated and its operations relocated. And this was followed up very quickly, like within hours, with an update that said that they had seen new communications suggesting that those plans had been canceled, which is a different wording from the comment that they then received from DHS, where DHS called it false that there had ever been such a plan. And so it leaves a few possibilities, right? It is possible that Huffington Post is correct, that they genuinely somehow came into information that the facility was going to move, and that there was then a change of heart of some kind, and the facility ended up staying. It is possible that the story was planted, and I don't mean that Huffington Post necessarily did something ingenuine by ending up publishing it. But for example, it is not insane to think that the feds would essentially give them false information so that then once they report it, they could discredit them basically by saying that wasn't true. I think that from the perspective of the public right now, and to be clear, I can only see what I've seen online, right? This isn't something I've been able to look at more closely, right? Like, or from the background, I should say. It's unclear exactly how that path of events ended up happening. But again, I do plan to go and document it. It'll be interesting to see what comes of it this Friday. It would also be interesting if, for example, they do plan to move, and then they said that they wouldn't, so that the protesters would end up at the wrong spot, right? All of these things, I suppose, are possible.
Do you think that these are going to grow? I mean, I have to be honest, looking at the polling on this from the standpoint of Democrats and Republicans winning on this immigration issue, you would think, or at the very least I would hope, that Americans would. It's one thing if Donald Trump was like, we're going to go after violent criminals. Okay, everybody I don't know how many people in the country would disagree with that, right? That's not really what's taking place, though. I mean, I could show you events where they blow up somebody's door and go snatch people who are Americans, like meaning they're getting wrong people over and over and over again, hanging out at courthouses where the judge is like, okay, we're going to extend your stay in the country, and the ICE agents grab the guy, meaning they're doing this without due process in many of these situations, which inflames the audience, inflames the crowd to say, this is not America that we're okay with. We're not okay with this, in which case you get resistance for it. Do you think these protests are going to expand, whether in Chicago, whether in California? Gavin Newsom just passed a law that they have already said we're not going to pay attention to. Effectively, you can't cover your face. Mm-hmm. Do you think this is going to get worse? Is the question. We have about a couple of minutes left.
Sure. Yeah, I think that it's complicated to predict that. I covered a lot of protests during Trump's first term, and particularly in the Washington D.C. area, it used to be like, oh, protests are like brunch, right? Like that you could pick a you could say I'm going to go participate in a protest on Saturday, and you could find one that would be there, right? Like there was just stuff like practically every day, but certainly every weekend. And that vibe has really changed here in Trump's second term. And I don't think it's because the types of people who would protest are any less passionate about it. But I do think that there's a sense of fear, and there's probably a sense of helplessness as well. But particularly with President Trump designating, for example, Antifa a terrorist organization, which is now very much uncharted territory, right? Like terrorist designations historically, and in terms of what legal apparatus exists, is really about foreign organizations, right? You can designate some foreign group, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, whatever, right? And then that has the legal implication of if you provide them material support, then you've committed a crime. Domestic organizations, the president may certainly disregard or may regard in a disfavorable way, but there hasn't ever really been a test run on what it means to call an organization a terrorist organization. Again, if it was foreign, then, for example, providing money, donating to Antifa, whatever counts as Antifa, would be a crime. In the context of domestic, I don't think that there's a legal apparatus to treat it that way, but it's unclear. Again, it's just in uncharted territory, and I think that does make people nervous. But more to the question. So now I've been in LA, where there was pretty direct fighting, and pretty specifically over kind of the same purpose as Illinois, the idea of trying to kind of just hinder to the extent possible the deportation machine, so to speak, right? Just literally putting yourself in the way to stop that kind of stuff. We saw that in LA, and that escalated kind of into riots. At the Broadview facility, I'm seeing the same kind of tactic be used, but that's two cities, and this is a federal operation. And so the question, does it rise or does it spread? I think it kind of remains to be seen, because there are also cities like Washington, D.C., where there have been a handful of massive protests, but they have not turned adversarial in the same way. And direct confrontation with ICE has mostly been limited to the extent that people figure out where they are. They go and just sort of yell at them. Memphis, Tennessee, Trump said sending in the National Guard, and basically their governor and their mayor said, cool, that sounds great, right? And my understanding is that there hasn't really been any highly organized protests. So I think it's going to end up depending on the particular city. I would imagine that there will be other kind of kinetic demonstrations as operations like Operation Midway Blitz continue to take place in new places. But we really will see, and I think it'll vary city to city.
Wow. Ford, thank you for this. The audience member was like, please bring this guy back for additional updates. I would love to have you back to give additional updates on this. By the way, one last question real quick.
Sure.
Well, you actually answered that. DC. I lived in DC for the last 5 years. So it's amazing to me of what's taking place. Donald Trump put those people, put the National Guard in areas that are effectively the more ritzy areas of DC. Effectively the low crime areas of DC. It's just weird.
I found it to be very aesthetic focused. I think that the National Guardsmen are largely standing around and not doing very much, but I think that it's supposed to be high visibility. Whereas my experience with the feds is I've spent probably 10 now evenings attempting to document the feds, like literally being in areas where there's been the most sightings of them, and then rushing often with other journalists to try to get to them when there's sightings of them. And I've managed to film a couple of checkpoints, right? And just a handful of times of feds like literally standing around and stuff. And my impression has been that they want the feds to be more like secret operators, right? That they show up and people aren't expecting them, so they can kind of have a blitz, right, against whatever their target is. Whereas the National Guard, they're just standing there with big guns and like drinking coffee and like doing nothing, but people see them.
Visibility. Wow. Ford Fischer, independent journalist, videographer, editor, a computer scientist, web designer. His work has been featured on CNN, Fox, MSNBC, ABC, and founder of N2. I think this is
N2S Reports is just the handle for News to Share.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Where can people find your work though? Like if they wanted to check out what you've been doing.
Yeah, so on Twitter, or now it's X, it's at Ford Fischer, which is the handle that I have typed there. The channel is called News to Share. It's news, the number 2 share, and that's both on Facebook and YouTube. And I have the website is news2share.com. That's news, the number 2 share.com.
Excellent. Ford, thank you for this, man. You be safe. Have a good rest of your day, okay?
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's go to our next guest. I see him in the background. Caleb Maupin. How you doing, Caleb? You doing okay this morning?
I'm good. A lot is happening in our world, but just staying on top of it and doing the best we can, right?
Yeah, that's all we can do, right? Caleb Maupin, he is a speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. Caleb, what is the name of your new book?
It's called Trotsky and the Neoconservatives, the whole story. And that book has been doing quite well. It was the top new release for quite some time. And I continue to do great conversations about it, explaining who the neoconservatives are and such. And, but yeah.
Well, I want to ask KY. The book is interesting just because I don't think people will entirely get the link. Like every so often I'll be talking to someone who's like, those Trotskyists. and the audience is like, what? What are you talking about? What do you mean Trotskyists? These guys are neocons. Yeah, they don't often see the link for it. So no, the book is fantastic. And people can get it on Amazon, correct?
Yes, and it's a wide distribution. So anywhere books are sold, basically.
Oh, even better. Okay.
Yeah, that's generally how it works with my books. I mean, as long as you have the ISBN, if you can pull the ISBN somewhere off, you go to Amazon, get the ISBN, take it to any bookstore, you can tell them you want it, you can get it.
Excellent. So I brought you on for several stories. There's one story that you sent me that I also want to cover. I have to hit this first, though.
Okay.
So let's see if I can find it. Right here. And I guess there are two of these. Tom, what is his last name? It dropped out of my mind all of a sudden. Tom, it'll come to me in a moment. But the U.S. envoy for Syria.
Okay.
He is apparently doing an interview, and he's being very candid in this interview, which is Tom Barrett. That's it. He's been very candid in this interview, which is pretty amazing of some of the things that he is effectively openly stating in this interview. One of those things is something that is obvious, but I'm shocked that the United States is owning up to the fact that this is indeed policy at this point. I want to play two videos for you. I'm going to play this one first to get your comment. Then I'm going to play the second one that is even more revealing than this one.
Because who are they going to fight?
Such a thing can be the case.
Talking about the left disarming Hezbollah.
It's the only people who are there. So LAF being mostly Sunnis, there are Shias, and it's a good organization. It's well-meaning, but it's not well-equipped. Because who are they going to fight? Right? We don't want to arm them. We're going to arm them so they can fight Israel? I don't think so.
So I hope the audience understands what he's saying. He's making the argument like, look, who are we going to arm these guys to fight in Lebanon? We're obviously arming them to fight their own people. So he's owning the fact that we're trying to start a civil war in Lebanon. I mean, there's another video where he even alludes to the notion that these guys are terrified there's going to be a civil war. As he openly points out, well, yeah, we're arming them to fight their own people. We're not going to arm this other group so they can go fight Israel. We need them to fight Hezbollah. And he even notes in one of the other videos or the other clips that Hezbollah's case is swollen by the fact that Israel is effectively murdering people in multiple countries over and over and over again. meaning that the argument that Hezbollah makes of, look, we're here to defend Lebanon as a resistance group against a maniac government is that much more emboldened by the fact that Israel is a maniac government, killing people in Lebanon and killing people in other countries. That is pretty amazing admission. Is it just the US no longer cares about secrecy and this stuff where it's nobody in America pays attention to it? And so what does it matter if indeed I'm openly admitting this kind of sinister behavior? Give me your thoughts on this. This seems outrageous to me.
Well, Google the Oded Yanan plan. Apparently that's been Israel's plan for quite some time, is to foment religious sectarianism and have the peoples of the region who are Muslim and oppose them fighting each other rather than opposing Israel. And that references Hillary Clinton's emails also. She said that Israel has thought for a long time that a region-wide Sunni-Shia war would be to its benefit. And I would argue that that was Barack Hussein Obama's plan as president. If you look at what the pivots were under his presidency, you had Saudi Arabia playing up the idea that there was a Shia crescent, playing up the idea that the Syrian government and Iran were, part of some kind of conspiracy of Shia Muslims to take over the world, and they were, sending these extremist fighters to Syria in the name of fighting the Shia apostates or Shia crescent, right? That was the narrative, and playing up the difference between the Sunnis and the Shias and trying to divide the different ethnic groups has been what Israel's been trying to do for quite some time. So, I mean, it doesn't really surprise me that it's being openly stated now. A lot of things are out in the open, and that is one of the interesting aspects of the Trump era, right? When Trump acknowledged that Saudi Arabia murdered the journalist, right? You remember that whole thing? And he said, look, we sell them weapons. So, we got to keep selling them weapons. We make all this money. Right. I mean, it was just really blatant, and that's one of the weird things about the time we're in, is that they used to dress up what they did with pretenses of democracy and human rights. Not so much anymore. Now there's a little bit more honesty.
Yeah, but I mean, that's pretty ballsy to effectively admit, well, it's unclear whether or not Lebanon is even going to do that. There's been grand shows of displays of opposition to it, where let's say people within the country that are supportive of Hezbollah has shown support in mass. And the people that I've talked to made the point of saying, if they wanted to be taken over, this is the way to go about doing it. Meaning Hezbollah will occupy many of these buildings and everything else, not necessarily have a civil war, but definitely occupy the buildings that the president doesn't have the support in the military or the political space to do this. And so Tom here over and over again bemoans, well, we've given them the map. They just won't do it. They're all talk. We've told them what they need to do. And it's like, you've told them that they should have a civil war, and they have told you to effectively F off because they can't do it. So what he interprets is, well, they're just all talk because they won't have a civil war. That's pretty amazing. I don't know. I feel you. The Trump administration has been more open about sinister behavior that under normal circumstances, other presidents have a sense to try to hide to maintain the image of America. But that is still pretty heady to just openly say, yes, we're trying to get these people to kill each other. That's what we're trying to do. That's Indeed. Our goal. That's our objective.
Yeah.
To make this even worse, there is this. He continues in this interview and he makes this statement. Hey, where do you think this is going to go?
What's the end game?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that, because I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Look, the end game, when we say peace, it's an illusion. There's never been peace. There will probably never be peace, because everybody's fighting for legitimacy. The end result is somebody wants dominance, which means somebody has to submit. In that part of the world, submit, there's no Arabic word for submit. They can't wrap their head around submit. So eventually, prosperity is the only answer.
I hate him as a human being. I swear to God, I do. He sits there in a suit. Mind you, this is the one who called them animals. As he openly opines in a suit, well, I'm just trying to get them to murder each other. That's all. I'm trying to get them to kill as many of themselves as they possibly can. That's what I'm trying to do. And he's sitting here in a suit as if he's this elegant, suave thinker. It's like, dude, you are a sociopath. You're a psychopath. As you sit here in the suit, just opining openly about getting people to murder each other. And then when they press him on this, because they're very agitated about the fact that I am trying to get you to murder each other. He's like, you animals. You need, you're acting like animals. You just need to calm down. You need to chill out. You need to be calm about what we're trying to do in your region of the world. He admits there, we have no plan in mind. We have no outcome that we can come up with that we think this is going to take place, because they're just so warlike and they're just going to keep fighting each other.
Well, the disturbing thing about that clip is I think the interviewer is looking at him and it's supposed to be so deep. It's supposed to be so edgy. Like, there is no plan. Like, there's just never going to be peace, man. Whoa. Yeah, we're so on it, man. We're deep. We're edgy. We're admitting it when no one else admits. We understand it, right? And that just comes across. That's just kind of sickening. The other thing is that, I mean, he says there's no Arabic word for submit. Islam is the way of submission, right? That is the entire name of the Islamic faith. So, you almost wonder if that's some kind of weirdly coded message or something. He has to know that, right? I mean, so.
No, he doesn't. Donald Trump believes that the Albanians were fighting the Algerians. Like, he doesn't. I don't think these people are competent, like, in the way that I think you think they are.
Okay. Well, I mean, that was just odd to hear him say that there's no Arabic word for submission. I'm just thinking, like, I mean, something's off, but I mean, maybe I'm giving him too much credit there. Maybe he's just, yeah. Again, I didn't like the tone of the interview, like the way it was just like, I'm sure he thought he was just being so bold and realistic or something. It's like, wow, that's great, and also, economic development would bring people together. If people are trading with each other, if there's jobs and opportunities, there could be possibilities for such a thing. And the Soviet Union was very interested in doing that. In the 70s and 80s, there was talk of the Soviet Union, launching a plan to have the Arab countries start trading with each other, to have them not just become oil plantations for Wall Street, but to have, joint development projects, green the desert, with irrigation systems, and if we did that, I think we could see peace in the region. And that's what China is trying to do with their Belt and Road Initiative. And they have stabilized a lot of regions that have had issues with drug dealers and terrorists and other extremist elements and such. I mean, if you look at, the Uyghur regions, how is it that China got, the Uyghur separatist stuff to calm down? Is with jobs, right? Exactly. They provided economic opportunity. And, when people have jobs and, a better future, they don't get involved in terrorist groups.
But that's not what he means. He's talking about the Abraham Accords. I mean, do you really think that a guy who is openly opining about getting people to murder each other in a country for the benefit of America, that he really cares about economic development in the region of the Middle East? Do you really think the U.S. cares about that? We care about submission.
No. And I think that, economic development would hedge into the monopoly. I mean, that's, again, imperialism is monopolistic capitalism. It's about keeping these countries in poverty. And, if they were to develop their own industries and, raise their people up and all of that, they would be competitors then. And they don't want competitors.
Yeah. They're talking about the Abraham Accords. They're talking about submission to the larger state of Israel for all intents and purposes, with Israel being the hegemon in the region. I mean, Donald Trump, apparently he is meeting with multiple Arab states that are effectively quislings of the U.S. to try to find an offload ramp to get those states to take over, I guess, Gaza militarily. I don't like, this is grotesque. I guess that's my main point about all of this. The other story I wanted to hit has to do with Jelani being in the United States. Now, Jelani is still, there's a wanted poster still on the U.S. Embassy's website for Jelani. Let me see if I have this up. Yeah, so I still have this up. All right, this is Jelani meeting David Petraeus, which, if anybody here is under, let's say, 20, you may not know how wild this is or grotesque this is. But this is these two in a meeting. Oh, they're just bros.
نعم بالتأكيد تترك العراق
They're just bros. Petraeus says something to the effect of, yeah, I had a difficult time in Iraq. And Jelani points out, yeah, but you had the opportunity to leave Iraq. I don't have the opportunity to leave Syria. And of course, they ham it up. You have pictures of Rubio shaking hands with Jelani. If you were an American soldier, what are you thinking about right now? Especially if you had the inopportune fortune to be fighting in Iraq, only for several years later, for one of the leaders in Iraq to now be shaking hands with a guy who chops off heads.
Well, it presents a lot of questions for sure. I attended Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearings as intelligence director on Capitol Hill, and she talked about Jelani a lot. And she seemed to talk about him as a terrorist, as a murderer, how angry she is that he's running Syria. And she's our intelligence director. And it seemed like that was the main thrust of her confirmation hearing, was just how much she hates Jelani. So, you know, but then we have David Petraeus, former CIA director and, you know, military general and such. And he's there palling around with him. And they still have the wanted poster on the website, right? I mean, it's like, it's not, he's not. So all of this raises some questions. You know, when we talk about Guantanamo Bay, there are former Taliban officials who were in Guantanamo from the time of 9/11, were released and are now running Afghanistan. And you have to wonder, like, how, you know, these forces have always functioned as proxies of the United States. Let's be completely clear about that. The Wahhabis, the reason Wahhabi Islam spread all over the world was in the 70s and 80s. Saudi Arabia had a lot more money, and the U.S. government wanted to use them to fight against communism. And so in Afghanistan, you had, you know, Osama bin Laden, the heir of the state monopoly construction firm of Saudi Arabia, sent to Afghanistan to mobilize an army of Wahhabi extremists to fight against the People's Democratic Party and the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. And the Saudi ideology spread all over the world as something that the USA was propping up to fight against communism, to fight against anti-imperialism. And every conflict, they're on the side of the United States. In Chechnya, they worked against the Soviet Union, against Russia, on the side of the United States. In Syria, they worked against the Syrian government and Bashar Assad and Ba'athist Arab socialism on the side of the United States. In Libya, they were against Gaddafi. There's not one place you can point to where the Al-Qaeda linked forces are really at odds with the USA and not on the US side. So it's interesting. After 9/11, we were all told, oh my God, we got to go get Al-Qaeda. We're going to fight Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda has always been on the side of the American government. Gaddafi offered to torture people in support of the U.S. war on terror. The Syrian government was a big supporter of the war on terror because they had been fighting Al-Qaeda linked extremists for a long time. The USA, the war on terror has been the USA acting as Al-Qaeda's air force and bringing down the various governments that got in their way and enabling them to set up shop in countries. The overthrow of Gaddafi's enabled Al-Qaeda to get much stronger. The overthrow of the Syrian government, we've got a literal Al-Qaeda terrorist who's now the leader, Jelani. And so this raises a lot of questions, but Guantanamo Bay exists. They did hold a lot of these people in Guantanamo Bay for years. And work on them. And then they've released a number of them. And now they are in the Taliban government of Afghanistan. Something's up. Something's going on here. You ask a lot of questions. There's also the case in Pakistan where there was this very, very prominent Wahhabi scholar, Afia Siddiqui, who's still being held by the U.S. government. And she was, abducted and, in charge, and she's in prison in the United States. And a lot of the ISIS terrorist attacks are being done. They always will name, well, we do this in support of Afia Siddiqui. You have to wonder what's going on. It's like that a whole network of Wahhabi extremists exists, right? And then the U.S. government fights them, but also uses them as attack dogs. Yes. And it's like, the whole thing about gangs and counter gangs. And it's like, we have no problem with extremists as long as they're, pointing the gun in one direction. As long as the bullets are flying in one direction, we're fine with them. And, Al-Qaeda has never really been an enemy of the U.S. government as much as they say it is. And it looks like it's still not. And that people who thought that after 9/11, we were going to just go get the people who did this and bring justice, that was never the intent, it looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, it's disturbing. That's all. It's very disturbing. I know people who fought in that war. And of course, those people were told by people like Petraeus, well, we're fighting, against Al Qaeda, we're fighting against terrorists, we're fighting against all of these horrible people who chop off heads, who put, I can't think of the guy's name. They put him in a cage and they set him on fire. Like, these are the people who we're fighting against. And then Trump goes, shakes the guy's hand, and then he goes visiting the New York skyline, the same skyline that other people in his organization actually changed in New York. It's just wild. And I don't know if America is making the association. Laura Loomer, of all people, weirdly enough, made the association. She says, oh my God, there's a terrorist walking through the streets of New York. And she flipped out on social media saying, what the hell is this? How is this taking place? How is this guy walking the streets of the US? He murdered Americans, et cetera, et cetera. She seemed to get it. The other people, not so much. I'm just imagining him going to a store in New York, buying a coffee and a Tic Tac, and New Yorker having no clue that he was part of the organization that was responsible for taking down the towers. It's just amazing. It's just mind-blowing. You sent me an article, and I got to be honest, I wasn't aware of this. And you point, I've tried to send this to my Twitter account for God knows how many times, and for whatever reason, it's not showing up on my Twitter account. So I'm just going to read it out. Religious persecution of peace activists escalates in South Korea. Now, I have to be honest with you. This will make sense to me under the previous president, Yoon Suk Yeol. But with the new president, who I have not remembered his name yet, because I haven't necessarily hit the stories enough with him to remember his name, but he is far more progressive and far more open to working with North Korea. It is an oddity to me that he would be presiding over persecution. So please explain the story to me. Give me context for this.
Well, there was an attempted coup by the previous president.
Yes.
And after that coup, the country's kind of in shock that went on. And the new party that's in power is now going after religious organizations. And they've been targeting a number of different prominent churches in South Korea that are perceived as in some way being aligned with the conservative party. And one church they're going after, though, is the Unification Church, which is the main church that has been an advocate for peace with North Korea. It's the most trusted by North Korea. So much so that, North Korea has actually sent them gifts, and, they were the main foreign investor in North Korea. They set up North Korea's state-run car company and all of that. And the Unification Church, started by the Reverend Sun Myung Moon, now, continued by his widow, Dr. Hak Jahan. They are they run the Washington Times, which is the newspaper and conservative Republican newspaper in Washington, D.C.
Do they? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're the owners of it. And they have been the main advocates. They're responsible for Trump visiting North Korea during his first term.
Wait. Just so I'm clear, you're saying that the Washington Times is run by a South Korean outfit?
Yes.
A South Korean Unification Church? Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, the Unification Church are the founders and legal owners of the Washington Times. And they're conservatives. There's a wide variety of, views. I think there are people that are members of their religion that voted, for liberals or Democrats. They don't take sides generally in politics, but, they tend to lean conservative and anti-communist, et cetera. But what's interesting is that, they did become the main investor in North Korea in the 90s. They set up a state-run car company there. And, it was kind of, and so now the latest development is, as of yesterday, Mrs. Moon, Dr. Hak Jahan, is in police custody. She's been arrested. She's 82 years old, and they are trying to put her in jail for bribery. And the allegations are very, very, weak. I mean, if you look at it, the allegation is that a former leader of the church gave a $3,000 handbag to the former first lady.
Are you serious?
Yeah. And it's the most if you look at South Korea and you look at their economy and you look at politicians and the lavish life that they live, a $3,000 handbag is not going to make or break. I mean, that's, and on top of that, for it to be a bribe, I mean, I'm not a South Korean lawyer. I don't know their legal system, but generally a bribe requires a quid pro quo. It's, you do this for me and I will do this for you. And there was no quid pro quo that I can understand. And, I went to their event in upstate New York on Sunday where they had about 1,000 people gathered. They were very worried. She was, taken into a detention facility on Monday. And the idea was the judge was going to rule on whether or not to proceed with criminal charges against her. And the judge did rule that she would face criminal charges. And so she's 82 years old. She's just out of the hospital. She just had heart surgery. And now she is arrested, pending trial for this bribery charge, because not her, but a former church leader who's no longer with them gave this handbag to the former first lady. I mean, it's completely absurd, but it's pointing to the turmoil in South Korean politics, which is that there's, every new government that comes in kind of has to put the previous government in jail. And that's part of the weird political turmoil the country is facing, a lot of which has to do with the fact that China is rising in influence in South Korea, but the United States has thousands and thousands of troops there. And, South Korea is not in the situation it used to be. It used to be South Korea was pretty much a straight up US-backed military dictatorship fighting against North Korea. Now, the population wants peace with North Korea. Now, China is an important trading partner of South Korea. And so there's a lot of infighting in the political process. Which way is South Korea going to go? And it looks like this church that is an advocate of peace with North Korea has been caught up and targeted in this political infighting. It's kind of disturbing. And I've noticed that the main person who's speaking up on their behalf is Newt Gingrich, of all people, the conservative.
That's weird.
Yeah, he's speaking up on their behalf. And, but they've put out quite a few statements and videos, and they very much feel that their efforts advocating peace with North Korea and their efforts, to help and enable Trump to get to North Korea in his first term are why they're being targeted. They feel that that's what has made them a target. If you watch the statements that Reverend Damien Dunkley, their leader, has put out, it's actually very interesting, and that they are historically considered to be a conservative church, and they were very anti-communist, but then they, reconciled with North Korea and became advocates of peace with North Korea. And so now they're caught up in this political turmoil. And they have pointed out that the persecution that they're facing, I mean, there are other churches that are being hit with a lot more charges. It seems like there's just, generally the conservative party tends to be aligned with more religious people. And this is the Liberal Party is going after as many churches that they can as a way to kind of weaken the Conservative Party. So, but it is weird to see them be, singled out this way, and to see that their 82-year-old leader is now, dragged into jail. That's very, very much a big concern. President Trump did mention this in his meeting with the South Korean president. And the question is how this could impact, what's going to happen. Apparently, Trump is headed to South Korea at the end of October. So that is quite interesting, and we'll see how that develops. But it's certainly a disturbing situation. I mean, it is important to note also the Unification Church was outlawed in Japan this summer. Now, that was an ongoing situation. That relates to what you and I talk a lot about Russia, because what happened in Japan was, Shinzo Abe, who is the conservative former prime minister, he was not in favor of isolating Russia. He says Vladimir Putin is his friend. And, he was saying at the time of the special military operation, right when it started up, he said, let's not demonize Russia. Let's try to de-escalate this and negotiate. And then what happened? Well, he was gunned down on the streets of Japan. And who killed him? Well, the guy who shot him spoke up and he said, well, I shot him because my mom's in the Unification Church and I hate the Unification Church. They're a cult and I'm mad at the Unification Church. Now, and he killed Shinzo Abe, shot him right on the streets of Japan. So then the Japanese media went into an overdrive, basically echoing the narrative of the killer and saying, oh, wow, the church is bad. And then based on that, now it took kind of a 3-year process. The Japanese government forcibly disbanded the Unification Church of Japan, shut down their bank accounts, seized their church assets. A lot of their church leaders from Japan have had to flee to the United States because they have nothing. I mean, they've lost everything. And so the Japanese government outlawed them in July and forcibly disbanded them. And now they're facing this persecution in South Korea. This is very, very interesting. It's very, very interesting. And, it says to me that the role that they play in terms of diplomacy and their relationship with North Korea is getting them targeted in a way that the killing of Shinzo Abe, I look at that, I think that was about Russia, right? And the fact that Russian president has brought Shinzo Abe's widow to Japan just earlier this year, right? And he gave her his personal limousine as a gift, right? Russian President Vladimir Putin very much knows that Shinzo Abe was murdered for being sympathetic to Russia, right? It was that. But yet the people that the trigger man that they found, it appears, is somebody who hates the Unification Church. This is very odd. And that there are, during the 70s, there were these things called deprogrammers. You know about the deprogrammers?
You mean
right?
like MK Ultra?
It was, people were joining the Unification Church or Scientology or communist groups or whatever. And so then there were these people that your parents could hire. If you were a legal adult, you're a college age student who was joining one of these groups, you could hire somebody who would kidnap them and unbrainwash them, right? It was a big thing that went on in the 70s, the deprogrammers, and they held people against their will and deprogrammed them from their political group. And it was something called the Cult Awareness Network was created, and they engaged in these kidnappings. And ultimately, the guy who started them, Ted Patrick, went to prison for doing this because you can't kidnap legal adults against their will. That is a crime. Right. And they were forcibly, they were sued out of existence after they kidnapped multiple people and violated their civil rights, basically, with false imprisonment. That happened in the 70s. But there was a whole network of people created, this Cult Awareness Network, that was created that is very much tied in with intelligence to some degree or other, right? That I think a lot of these religious groups or political groups that were targeted were viewed as being potential pawns of intelligence. And so American intelligence and U.S. government intelligence and some wings of the American state seem to have launched this deprogrammer thing. And it is these deprogrammer networks that apparently this guy who killed Shinzo Abe was tied into. He had, he'd grown up in the Unification Church. He quit the Unification Church. He was really mad at it. He was involved in these deprogrammer networks of people who hate the Unification Church. He then went and killed Shinzo Abe. And I was kind of impressed with the assassination, I must say, because in Japan, you can't have a gun. Guns are completely illegal in Japan.
Right.
This guy made a gun himself, right? It was a homemade gun, and he got 2 shots out of it. That takes a huge amount of skill. This guy, like with a 3D printer, made his own gun with 2 barrels, found a former prime minister on the street, and killed him with his homemade gun. That takes a level of skill. That's not something that the average person can just do. Right.
It seems implausible.
And shot to kill. Shot to kill with his homemade gun. But yet he's tied in with these, these deprogrammer circles. And these deprogrammers, right, the main guru of the deprogrammer circles was trained by a U.S. military psychologist, right?
I'm sorry to interrupt. Just to be clear, this was a political hit. I mean,
clearly it was.
And just to back it up, it is very strange for somebody to murder a prime minister. And then the media says he was going after Shinzo Abe because of his mom was in a Unification Church. And they side with the murderer and going after the church? How bizarre is that? I mean, that's obviously a political cudgel. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
No, go ahead. Yeah. And so there are these networks of people who don't like the Unification Church and don't like other groups and have engaged in these kidnappings. And they seem to be tied to American intelligence. The guy who leads these networks, their big name, is a guy named Dr. Steve Hassan. And he wrote a book called The Cult of Trump that was, a big selling book. And he was on CNN after January 6th. He said, all of America needs to be deprogrammed from the cult of Trump. And he claims that Trump is like hypnotizing people and using hypnosis and stuff. It's one of the most bizarre things ever. But, he was trained by, prominent, he cites a prominent U.S. military psychologist, one of the MK Ultra guys, as being his mentor who trained him. And I exposed that he was the advisor to BreadTube. Remember BreadTube, ContraPoints, and Vosh and all of them? They were all being advised by Steve Hassan. And I got that information.
Seriously? I didn't know that. Are you serious?
I am serious. And I wrote my book, Bread Tube Serves Imperialism, that made a big splash because it was revealed to me. I received a dossier showing that Dr. Steve Hassan, the deprogrammer guy, was telling Bread Tube how to do their thing. Right. And then Gray Zone then later revealed that it was that BreadTube was being subsidized by MI6, British intelligence, right? That Abigail Thorne was being paid by them to make propaganda against Syria and, about the vaccine mandates and things like that. And so, this all is like all wrapped up into one thing. And I see, the killing of Shinzo Abe and then the Unification Church being outlawed in Japan. And, Shinzo Abe's position on Russia and then their relationship with North Korea, how North Korea and Russia are very, very close now. And now I see that they're jailing the leader in South Korea. And it's all connected. And it sounds almost like crazy a little bit, but it's like we're looking at a very elaborate scheme, a very elaborate world of, different networks and stuff. And then you see the Russian president taking Shinzo Abe's widow to Russia and giving her his personal limousine as a gift, basically saying, I support you. And I know that your husband was killed because he wanted to have peace with Russia. And I'm telling you, man, this is there's a lot here, right? But this is worth paying attention to. This story about what's going on with Hak Jahan Moon and the fact that, there are some people in the Trump administration who want to make peace with Russia, right? And Tulsi Gabbard and others. And Donald Trump is headed to South Korea in October. And so now Hak Jahan Moon, Holy Mother Han, the widow of Reverend Sun Myung Moon, is in jail and, possibly facing criminal charges. This is all connected. And we have to understand how all of this works, right? We live in a strange world where, if you just look at this from the outside, you wouldn't realize how much, the quote unquote intelligence world, how much the spook world, if you want to call it that, right, is present, right? And that there are networks doing all kinds of crazy things, and it's all connected. So there you go.
Just for the basics, I just want to make sure I understand the basics.
Yeah.
The former first lady gave her a $3,000 handbag, and from that they said you were getting bribed, and as you're getting
the allegation, a former leader of the church gave the former first lady a $3,000 handbag.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah.
The former leader of the church gave the former. Okay. And they're saying you're trying to bribe the first lady.
Yeah. And he's quit the church since. He's no longer involved. And he apparently, there was some investigation internally. There was some issues with that guy, but he's left the church since then. So that they have now arrested, Mother Moon, Holy Mother Han for that, right? Saying that she bribed the former first lady with this $3,000 handbag.
And just to be clear, the former first lady is of Young Suk Yeol.
Yeah, of the previous president who tried to do the.
I mean, let's be honest, though. He wasn't just trying to do a coup. He was trying to start a war with North Korea and use that as a pretext to murder his political opposition. I mean, to call it a coup is such an understatement. I understand your point that she might not have had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
But the fact that, and this is not me justifying the government's reaction to this, especially going after a religious figure that obviously given a $3,000 handbag is not a bribe.
Mm-hmm.
I understand the reactiveness on this one, though.
Okay.
I get it. Whether it's right or wrong, I do get it. I mean, he tried to literally, and to make it even worse, part of the rationale for this was because North Koreans were helping the Russians in Russia, push back the Ukrainian military. And it seems that what the United States wanted to do was take control of the South Korean military within the context of this, so he can create a justification to send those soldiers into Russia to fight the Russian military. Like, meaning it went far deeper than just him trying to overthrow the government. The moment that the military is activated, the United States get control of the South Korean military. That's my understanding of the way that their military operates. And so if you're able to become a dictator and you're able to say, well, my opposition is working with the Chinese, or what seemed to be the plot that he was trying to create was the North Koreans killed the political opposition, which justifies a war against North Korea now, which on some level affects the North Korean influence in Ukraine. Like, this stuff was a web of stuff that these guys were effectively trying to do, with the United States seemingly being behind this, considering the US had nothing to say about an obvious and overt coup attempt that was trying to take place on South Korean soil. So if my point in this is saying this is, if they are looking for anything that they think has anything to do with that, this may be where she is getting swept up into. Or you don't take it that way. You take it more so as, no, this is more to do with the intel. The reason why the story doesn't make sense to me is because he was trying to start a war with North Korea.
Yeah.
And so if this was trying to be a unification between North Korea and South Korea, that government was doing everything in its power to prevent that reunification, and not just prevent that reunification.
Well, right. And when the coup happened, I will say the Unification Church people were very afraid that Mrs. Moon would be arrested during the coup. They almost expected her to be arrested during the coup. You know, they expected her to be considered, because they were, you know, there was going to be arrests of what they considered pro-North activists, right? That's what the coup, you know, and so they were very afraid for her safety during the coup. They expected that she would be arrested, you know, if the coup was successful. So you know, they were not supporting the coup.
But that's what I'm getting at. The government wasn't pro North Korea, though. The government was trying to provoke a war with North Korea.
Right.
So
the other thing is that Sue Mi Terry, have you looked at that case? Right.
No.
So the top advisor to both Bush and Obama on North Korea related matters is this woman named Sue Mi Terry. And Joe Biden indicted Sue Mi Terry under the Foreign Agents Registration Act and charged her with being an unregistered agent of South Korea. Right. And she's still indicted. Trump has not lifted the charges. And it's also a handbag. It's also.
Are you serious?
Yeah. The South Korean, you know, diplomats took her shopping and bought her handbags. And, you know, and she's also indicted. And her husband is Max Boot, and she's kind of an important figure in the foreign policy establishment of the United States. But she's facing a prison sentence possibly for being a foreign agent because the South Korean government supposedly bought her handbags. So, you know, you know, this is all, there's something going on here. I'm just telling you.
Yeah, this is a trope at this point. I mean, if it's almost like they leave, you know, it's almost like if somebody hacks a computer and they leave their call sign, and that handbag is a call sign to make the point of saying, this is an intel. This is not serious.
Yeah.
Like something else has gone on in regards to the way this is operating. She get a $3,000 handbag, and the court literally looks at that and said, this is clearly a bribe that she got a handbag.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the government was against the North Korea. I guess what gets me is I don't fully understand how she had a relationship with the previous disgraced president, or at the very least with the wife, despite the fact that the previous president was against North Korea and trying to use or to start a war with North Korea, while she was at the Unification Church. It seems like the political priorities would be dramatically different. That's what's confusing me.
Well, and that also they're not, I mean, during the 1970s and 80s, they were a very, you know, conservative force. Fighting communism was their focus. But they made the point, and I went to their event in upstate New York where they kind of went over the details of the case. They made the point, we're not politically aligned. We don't endorse the conservatives. We don't endorse the liberals. We are just a church in South Korea now, you know. So, you know, it's a very, very odd situation. And I really don't know what to make of it. But yeah, like you said, the handbags, this is a political job. I mean, they're going after the Unification Church for political reasons. And it's probably tied in with what's going on in Japan also, right? That they're viewed as an entity that the deep state can't control. I mean, you know, they've made somebody mad within the power structure, and somebody's threatened by them. And there are these networks of people who oppose them, right? And that's also very mysterious. And like, you know, Dr. Steve Hassan, who is their big enemy, right? It's his networks, apparently the guy who killed Shinzo Abe, are tied in with, right? And Dr. Steve Hassan, he always says, oh, you know, he's against cults, and Russia is a political cult, and China is the world's largest political cult. And, you know, and he's a Russiagator to the extreme. He claims that, you know, Trump was colluding with Russia, and that Alex Jones is secretly getting orders from Moscow. And, you know, those deprogrammer networks are really, really pro-U.S. foreign policy, pro-regime change, etc. And so it's all very, very strange. The other thing that's interesting about this is there's kind of a parallel here that I've noticed is, you know, during the Cold War, the American government propped up various entities to fight communism, right?
Yes.
You know, like Manuel Noriega, the leader of Panama, right? He was a military dictator who was against communism. So the U.S. government propped him up, but they didn't really like them. You know, it was just kind of like, okay, we'll tolerate you and we'll prop you up to fight communism. But then after the fall of the Soviet Union, George Soros started destabilizing those countries too, because the way you set up like a military dictatorship, you have to be very strong. You have to be very economically prosperous. You have to actually hand out the goods, right? And like Park Chung-hee, who was the dictator of South Korea, he was handing out the goods. He built the modern South Korean economy, and the USA kind of had to tolerate it because it was against communism. But eventually, it looks like they got rid of him, and they had the Korea Gate hearings of 1978, 1979, and he died under very mysterious circumstances. You look at the death of Park Chung-hee, and that the Carter administration very much wanted Park Chung-hee out, and he was assassinated by the head of the Korean CIA while they were having dinner at his house. Just shot him in the face, and then the head of the Korean CIA was summarily executed and never got to state his motive for killing Park Chung-hee, the military dictator. And that it's like, on the one hand, the U.S. government will prop up these entities, but it doesn't really trust them and it doesn't really like them. And it's always kind of threatened by them. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of like what we talked about before about with like Al-Qaeda, right? They were willing to back Al-Qaeda, but to some degree or other, they want to assert control over it, right? And it's, it's this game where it's like that in order to fight, communism, in order to maintain the dominance of imperialism, part of it is propping up entities that you don't totally control. That seems to be part of the game that they play. So, I mean, that's a factor you have to look into here, and that they don't really trust any illiberal organization, no religion, no mass political movement. They don't really trust any of them, but they will boost them here and there for their own ends.
Caleb, this has been a fascinating story. I swear to God. Spy versus spy in this kind of very strange way. It's like we can't see, it's so murky in regards to seeing what is actually taking place. But obviously, she was set up.
Yeah,
she was clearly set up. Man, I'm going to put the story at the bottom of the video just so people will be able to see it for themselves, and I would attach it to the website itself, the Center for Political Innovation. That way, people can just read it. You wrote it out so people can get an understanding of all of this stuff as it takes place. Thank you for this. Thank you for giving me this story. By the way, I didn't realize it's gotten. There's so many stories that are taking place that we're just completely unaware of. That are happening. So thank you for this.
Sure.
Caleb Maupin. He is speaker, writer, journalist, political analyst, author. His latest book, Trotsky and the Neoconservatives. You can get that book pretty much anywhere, as he pointed out. It's on Amazon. You can even get it from your bookstore if you have the ISBN. Also, Center for Political Innovation. That's an organization that Caleb has started. And I'm trying to think, is there anywhere else people can find you, Caleb?
I'm all over YouTube. I do regular streams and all of that. So yeah, I'm everywhere. So there you go.
Fantastic. You have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Talk to you soon. Yep. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. Wow. Caleb is fantastic. I've said it on more than one occasion. You can sit there and listen to Caleb for like an hour. He is really good. But we've come to the end. We've come to the end. Black Spock. Shout out to you, Black Spock. Thank you for that super chat. Oh, super sticker. I'm sorry. I don't know the difference between a super chat and a super sticker. I don't know why you need to. But apparently YouTube found it that they did. So shout out to you, Black Spock. As I always point out, you guys, what is this? Great stream. What is Red Axis saying? I think that's Red Axis. Great stream. Caleb on his channel. Caleb Maupin. Yes. Very fun. Cool music. Yeah, Caleb Maupin is cool people, man. Look, I want to thank all of you. You guys make this content what it is. You can support the content. PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, Super Sticker, apparently Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal. I think that's everything. You guys help make the show what it is. Can't do the show without you. And for all intents and purposes, you help pay for the show. So thank you for it when you do. Also, likes help with the algorithm. Shares help also with the algorithm. I think that's it. You all have a fantastic day. Jamal Thomas Morning Show. Yeah, avoid handbags. Avoid handbags. Avoid handbags. I don't know what else to tell you, man. Avoid handbags. If somebody comes out random and says, hey, I'm just going to get his handbag. Back away. Back away. Take no handbags. That shit is a trap. It's like a honey pit or a honey pot. Jamal, how do you give a $300 handbag? Yeah, avoid handbags. Avoid handbags. Avoid handbags. God, man, that's like having a honeypot. What is it? Kash Patel's wife? They call her honeypot. The Israelis put a honeypot on him. Diane Thomas, good show. Mama Thomas. Well, thank you, Mama Thomas. I appreciate that. But even if it was a horrible show, Mama Thomas, he'd be like, good show, boo. It's like, that show sucked. But no, this was a good show. This was a good show. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. Yeah, I don't know if I'd be susceptible to a handbag. Honeypot, maybe. Honeypot named Kalis. It's like, tell me all of your secrets. What do you want to know? No, God, man, that is so screwed up. Because it's so unassuming, right? Let's say you know somebody. You give somebody a handbag. And then they turn around and say, this is obviously a bribe. How is me giving this person a handbag a bribe? And then, of course, they find some letter of the law that they could say, subsection 234, subsection of that 568, subsection of that, you're fucked. Says this is a crime. Take her away. It's screwed up. It's really screwed up. Jamal, what about that? What Dr. Hassan? Who's Dr. Hassan? I don't know who Dr. Hassan is. He didn't provide proof or background of the story for Dr. Hassan accusation, though. I don't know who Dr. Hassan is. So there's that. Jamal, you're worth your weight in handbags. Thank you for that. Did not get it. So it looks like he stole my handbag. All of my money is gone now. Yeah, the handbag thing is just weird. The handbag thing is super weird. That is so bizarre. Yes, you'd fall for a honeypot, Jamal. Even on, what is it, the night on the corporate level, they'd get you easily just saying sorry. Rentier, oligarch. It depends on the honeypot. I could be, I'm complicated. I'm complicated. I'm very complicated. Believe it or not, I am more complicated than it may seem. But the right type of honeypot, the right type of chess, oh God, man. If it's like, hey, I play chess. Do you? You play chess? Yeah, and I did so-and-so. Really? You did that too? Yeah, I'd be a sucker for that stuff. They can tailor it just right. I'd be fucked. I would be fucked. Female chess players, oh, they're so attractive. Female chess players are attractive. And she's a Star Trek fan. I'd be screwed. I'd be screwed. But they'll give away the goose, right? It'd be like, tell us what you know about so-and-so. What? Hey, babe, I'm just playing. Want to play some chess? Okay. That was a little bit weird, though. Looks like you were trying to extract information out of me. Would you like a handbag? But just go. I know you're a honeypot. When she offer the handbag, that's when I know she's that's when I get it. That's when it'll become clear to me that she's trying to get me on something. Yeah, that is horrible, man. You know, they've said that you can get any person on any crime, or not any person on any crime, but people commit X number of crimes a day. That's why it's over-criminalized. You have so much stuff that's written down that they can find a crime to get you with, whether you committed a crime or not. That's why you have police states in the way that police states operate for that very specific reason. Yeah, but the handbag thing sucks. That just sucks. Yeah, that sucks. All right, let's end this. Be kind to the degree that you could be kind. I will see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Who's going to be on tomorrow? Kern and Dennis Fritz is going to be on tomorrow. So that should be a really good show. Yeah. Well, if you do it on a cop, they'll say it's an aggressive action or something. Do you realize I've seen cops beat a person bloody? And when the person bled on the cop said, you've assaulted me now, but that you've bled on me. No bullshit. I've seen them do that shit. All right. Have a good one, guys. You be safe. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for joining me. See you tomorrow.